There are parts of me that's very radical, of course. I think most people who are libertarian have that in them. But I also have to think about, what can I realistically do if I'm running for office, right? As an activist, I can yell and scream, get rid of the government or something. I mean, of course you can if you're an activist. But once you put your hat into the ring to be a candidate, you have to at least have some policies that can work as a third party. If you're a Democrat or Republican, you actually don't have to have any policies. It's not required. All you do is yell other guy bad and you'll be fine, right? That's the issue. So because I'm third party, I am scrutinized. Is that the right word, scrutinized? Far worse than Democrats, Republicans are. If you go to any of their websites, they have virtually no policy. So relative to them, oh my God, I'm chock full of policy compared to them, right? So, but I have to be, because if I'm wrong on one thing, people will dismiss me. If the Democrat or Republican are wrong on anything, they go, well, at least he's not the other guy. So I have a harder, I have a tougher climb.
That's fair. No, I understand. Well, if you're ready, I'd love to get into your platform. I mean, that's what I was looking up right before we started this conversation. And
was this a platform talk? Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Of course, Larry. We're talking economics. We're talking libertarian economics, I suppose it looks like. And I've got my.
I love it.
I've got my objections, and maybe you can quell them in the midst of this conversation. But to introduce yourself to my audience, this is Larry Sharpe. I was talking about you before this, all good things. I was saying,
thank you.
Well-known national libertarian, hasn't quite run for president yet, ran for governor in 2018, running for governor again in 2022, vice president in 2020. So, a credentialed libertarian. And we were going over your platform until you interrupted us by calling us, Larry.
Steve, that'd be messing things up. I apologize.
It's okay. We'll forgive you. But let's get into it. So on your platform, you mention expanding renewables and nuclear development, right? And so, one of the things anyone who works in development, especially in renewables, knows that, well, basically, you don't want to develop in New York because it's so friggin' much of a headache, right?
Absolutely.
And right now, New York is in this weird position where no more gas development, but also it's hard to develop renewables. So you have to import the gas power, which just makes everyone look bad.
Bad. We shut down our nuclear power plants. We're anti-nuclear. So far, our wind and solar is not doing a good job. We have serious NIMBY issues when it comes to the way that we actually could do it. There is a way we could do some renewables out on one of our lakes, right? We could do some on our lakes. We could. But the problem is there's a lot of nimbyism. So we either have to somehow get past the nimbyism, or we have to use nuclear power. And the funny part is, you would think when it comes to nimbyism in my state, that it'd be worse with nuclear power. It's not. It's the state and the federal government that don't like nuclear power. The individual people, they want a nuclear power plant in their area because of the jobs that it brings, right? And where I put it in New York State would be, it would actually be in the North Country. And if I could put 3 nuclear power plants in the North Country, I only have to fight the federal government, which in many cases is actually easier than fighting the local people. So yes, we are in a tough spot here. You're right.
Well, I think the biggest problem with renewable development is almost inherent, right? Is that, so typically, renewable energy, right? In my experience is that renewable energy, there's usually a lot more liberal type people that work in renewable energy. However, the challenge of anyone that works in renewable energy development is that renewable energy has to be developed in very rural, low density areas, because it's, imagine trying to build a solar plant in an urban city. It's just going to be impossible.
Right. Sure.
And so it creates this scenario where, you've got oftentimes these more liberal development people working with very conservative communities that frankly just
100%.
might not like renewables because, conservative politicians just might not like renewables. And so the NIMBYism makes a lot of sense as a reason why we can't develop renewables a lot of times. But how do you solve that from the state level while at the same time respecting local autonomy? It seems like
there's 2 parts to this, right? It is. And there's a couple parts to this. Part number 1, when it comes to solar that's onshore, yes, it tends to be conservative areas. But when it comes to offshore, it actually tends to be more liberal areas. Right, it tends to be people who have those lovely homes out on the on Lake Ontario, who don't want, or out in the Bay in Massachusetts, who don't want those horrible windmills, wind turbines in front of their views, and when they're going up their sailboats. So I think it's both in that regard, right? Depends upon whether you're inland or whether you're offshore. But you're right. So what New York State has done is we've created basically our development commissions, and what that means is the state decides, hey, here are 4 people in this regional, development corporation, and they will be selected, 5 people, 3 by the governor, 1 by the state assembly, and 1 by our state senate, and they will go in and they will decide whether or not this is a good place to put, for example, solar panel farm, something like that, right? Now, there's so many problems with that. In theory, they pull them from the local area. They don't always, it's not required, but they often do. But the problem is they are not elected. They are simply appointed. So when the people come and say, hey, I don't like this, I don't want this, solar farm next to my pig farm, or whatever it's the case may be, the people at the development corporation listen and go, oh, that's nice, ignore them, and then do it anyway. So the local people actually don't have much of a choice in New York State, and they get hammered. And because of that, you find a lot of people who are angry at renewables, not because they hate the renewables, but because they felt like they were just run over. And they're right, they were. That actually did happen. It happens often. So now we have even a negative feeling against it on top of it, whether they actually cared about it or not. So it would be better, at least, to get around NIMBYism if at least they were elected. That doesn't solve the problem completely. It just makes it better. And then if they still push through, at least the people there aren't so angry because they were able to at least get elected officials there and talk about it. So that's why you do want to have, you don't want to use what we're using now, which is selected people from Albany. That just feels like you're coming in and taking people's power away. So that's the first piece. You want local people to make decisions. Again, doesn't fix NIMBYism, but it makes it better. The second piece is try to give people what they actually want. And that's why it's about nuclear power. If you go to the North Country in New York State, not everybody, but far more people are happy to have a nuclear power plant. In fact, many of them in that area. So because they want that, it's a whole lot easier to get that done. Not just that, if I can get wind power, which I have not put, I don't know if you're reading any of my policies. Wind power is not there yet. That's something we brought up recently, and the team is still working on the policy for that. We're actually considering putting wind power on Lake Ontario, only because that we can maybe put it far enough away and still make enough energy to where the NIMBYism isn't so bad because it can't be seen from the coast. So we're actually considering that too, because you're right. The biggest issue is NIMBYism. So let's get around it. Let's come up with answers that people actually want.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, because at the end of the day, right, to have these projects, a lot of these projects developed, you're going to have some sort of local permitting, right? And the local permits are going to be decided by your county commissions, right? And so I don't know if it's a totally undemocratic process from the local side, because, at the end of the day, it's pretty rare that a state government's just going to say, yeah, well, we're going to build this here, right? No matter what.
That's
right?
That happens literally every month in New York State.
Well, no, but I'm saying that
every month
New York
happens.
State, though.
Yes.
No, but in New York State, though, if I'm not mistaken, maybe I am mistaken, at the end of the day, for a lot of the building permits and land permissions, the state isn't, you have to get local permits, right? So like either because it's county land or because these are literally like private farm owners that own this land that, you're not going to just like, you're not just going to take up their farm and build a solar
It's
plant.
called eminent domain, and New York does it all the time. I'm literally talking about eminent domain issues. I don't know, every quarter there's somebody saying they're taking my line, they're taking it. Yes, the most popular one recently was in Utica, where the state came in to build a hospital, and there were 40 businesses that just said, get out, go away. Local people didn't even want it, didn't matter, gone. Eminent domain. Yeah, we do it constantly in New York State. It's a norm. It's the way it is. It's far. I don't know if your audience, if any of them live in New York State, please ask them. They will tell you, yes, Larry Sharpe's right. It's done all the time. And the regional economic development corporations, they're the ones who do it. And they just decide to do it. They are appointed by our state. So there's not even any local feeling about it. So it does happen very often. In fact, as I've crossed the state many times, probably every 6th or 7th event I do, there's someone going, the state just decided to take X feet of my property because they ran short because of the solar power plant or because of their solar plant or because of their so-and-so.
These are like
insanely common.
These are like state RFPs. I guess this isn't private development. Okay, so I guess that's what I'm referencing. Yeah, my experience is that when you're talking about private development, you do have to deal more with the county commissioners. But yeah, I guess if you're talking about a state RFP, that might be different. Now, to be fair,
100%.
I guess a pushback could be that, well, I mean, if we didn't have this power, right, we would have less, renewable development, right? Because then we'd have a
We
lot
already
more.
have less. We're already struggling, right? If your argument is without it, we'd be better. Well, no, we'd find another answer, right? Without it, we'd find another answer. We wouldn't just say, oh, it's very easy to take these farmers' lands and push them around, so I'll do it. And in fact, the government does it so that the government can hand out jobs, right? One of the things, again, many states do this. This isn't just New York, but we are really good at this. And that is making sure the government builds it, not allowing a private company to officially build it. The government officially builds it so we can hand out jobs to our cronies and our friends and pay back donors. It's a very common thing done in our state cons. That's why our governors keep getting indicted, right? That's why our just this week, our lieutenant governor got indicted, right? This is why we get indicted. This is how my state runs. So I think in theory, you may be correct, but I'm telling you, literally, the indictment record of my last 4 governors and lieutenant governors would kind of show you how New York State works.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I get that. I think I'm not saying that there's no corruption in the contracting process. I'm just skeptical of the idea because I mean, one of the problems with
Hold
like
on,
the
skeptical of what?
foundations.
Hold on, skeptical of what?
I'm skeptical of the idea of getting rid of a more overarching state authority to develop certain sort of socially necessary projects, whether it be like affordable housing or renewable energy. Because one of the the foundations of nimbyism is local pushback to development,
Yep,
right? Now,
correct.
for instance, and there's a financial incentive to push back, right? And so, whether we're talking about, local city councils or local community boards that are elected,
Yep,
you're talking about appointed ones, but there are elected
sure.
ones out there. Like we've run this
Yep.
experiment. And in the case where they're elected, it doesn't seem like they're particularly more favorable about development. It seems like you do need some sort of central authority to say that, hey, look, for this socially necessary purpose, right, we have to develop this, right? And if I understand it sucks that, your house went from being worth 1.8 million to 1.4 million, but that's just how it is. We need to extend this, these projects. I mean,
So,
it's
here's my problem though with that. What you just said
yeah, go
is
for
you
it.
said these socially required. Who the hell decides what's socially required? What I've seen in my state, and maybe other states are different, but I doubt it, is socially required means my guys give me money. So therefore, that's socially required. That's what I see consistently across my state. So if you're telling me what socially required is, we have to build a hospital as an example. I just saw 40 businesses go under when there were other places to build the hospital. Now, did it save lives moving the hospital there? Maybe, we don't know. It's possible that in the next 10 years, they will have saved some lives putting a hospital there versus 5 miles down the road. Maybe. I don't know that if it's true. I also don't know
Yeah.
how we could even measure that if it is true. But what I do know is literally 40 businesses went under. Several of them left the state because someone said a hospital was, as you said, socially important. I don't buy that at all. If it's socially important, then the people there in the society should be the ones deciding that. And if you go, but Larry, they may not, then they're going to pay the price, aren't they? At one point, you find an answer. Maybe you have to pay more money. Maybe you go someplace else. But every time you just say government can make that, government does it. In fact, we take people's homes for casinos. Now, I don't see that as being socially critical. Maybe
Well,
I'm wrong.
but yeah.
That
No,
happens consistently. You're
Yeah.
saying we should have this authority. I don't trust this authority. And you're saying historical? Historically, this authority has been completely a disaster. Historically, has failed miserably consistently. I just don't see it ever. I don't see it being good in general.
Well, yeah, but we're not talking about the standard New York State government. We're talking about Larry Sharpe's New York State government. All right. Of
Well,
course,
but
you
again,
won't
even
be
with
equally
me,
corrupt, I
yes,
assume.
which is why I take the power away from me. You are exactly correct. It's why. Do I think I'm incorruptible? I wish I was. I hope that I am. But I'm a human being, so I'm probably not. And even if I am, I'm the superhuman that's incorruptible. Eventually, someone else takes over the governorship, right? So whether or not I'm incorruptible or not is irrelevant. The point is, I should be creating a system to where I can't do this. I don't want the state having this power. I don't. If it takes more time for the people of a state to agree to make it happen, then it takes more time. But here's the difference. If it takes more time for the state to say, you know what, we do need nuclear power or solar power or wind power or whatever the thing may be, if it takes more time for the state to agree to that, then they'll do it, and they'll do it eagerly, and they'll do it happily, versus it being forced, and then they fight back, and then it fails, and then it's late. I don't know the last time you remember this. I don't remember ever hearing this. My God, that government project, on time and under budget. I have never heard that. Maybe it happens. I've never heard that once, which means usually it will be over budget and it will be delayed. And when that happens, the taxpayer pays even more money.
Yeah, sure.
While they're fighting back.
Yeah, I think it depends. I would say that renewable energy, which is what we're talking about here, is a very specific case. And I think that when you're talking, or I suppose energy deployment broadly with the nuclear power as well.
Sure.
I don't, you can certainly point to examples of government RFPs going basically awry, being corrupted as a process and stuff like that, right? But
Sure.
I think at least in the case of renewable energy, right, it's pretty damn difficult to argue that we don't need to develop more renewable energy, especially with climate change.
But didn't I just give you, hold on, didn't I just give you two answers, nuclear and wind? I gave you two answers that gets around nimbyism, that keeps people happy and still gets my energy in. The only people stopping me in this case is the federal government. So in this case, I have a plan that allows you to get what you want, right? Cleaner energy, wind and nuclear. That's two different ones. And the people are okay with it. So I'm not going to do it nimbyism. The only problem is the federal government.
Well, but if you're talking about developing wind power that's so far offshore that you can't see it from the horizon, well, then you're talking about adding additional unnecessary construction costs. So it sounds like we're either left with, okay, well, maybe over budget and not on time, but then we might just be injecting artificially that over budget and longer construction period because, well, now we have to build it way far offshore to get around the nimbyism. Right now, I'm
possible,
not.
Yes.
There's not a good answer to this. It's a hard thing to do. It just sounds like, from my perspective, what I would prefer is more sort of internal mechanisms to reform the transparency of RFPs and the accountability of RFPs versus just taking that power away and making it more localized. I just feel like in that regard, we'd end up.
We've been passing those laws that you just are talking about. We've been passing those laws for literally 50 years, since the EPA in the 70s. We've been passing those transparency laws, and it's gotten nothing but worse. So I get it. I don't know. 8 more laws until it works. I'm telling you, with what I had just told you, I had to come up with that answer. Why? Because I had limitations. What happens when you have limitations is you get creative. Creativity creates limitations. You limit the government, it has to become more creative. You don't limit the government, it hits you over the head with a hammer. We see that consistently. All I'm saying is I gave you real answers. In New York State, there are none. Go to the Republican running. You will find no answers for this. Go to the Democrat, our current governor. You will find no answers for this. Our current governor, her answer is buy more energy. That's her answer. Buy more energy. The Republican has no answer. It's just Democrats bad. That's his answer. So I hear what you're saying, but I'm telling you though, I'm giving you an answer with the restrictions that I will put on myself. I'm prepared to give you an answer. Will it be more expensive? Maybe, but even if it's more expensive, at least we know it's expensive up front. We're not smacked in the face with it 3 years down the road. We can see how it will work. I got people who are satisfied, and I know from my business experience, a bad plan run by people who want to succeed is better than a good plan with people who don't want it to succeed.
Well, I think that with regard to, it sounds like honestly with your plan, it's not mutually exclusive from mine anyway, right? I mean, the idea of developing offshore, federally permitted, basically wind and solar farms isn't mutually exclusive with, trying to, well, you could say encourage, but basically like force local development of renewable assets. And so, I don't know. I guess that's a difference of philosophy there. And ultimately, whatever ends up with more renewables is fine. One thing that you said in your
right. My point is always trying to get an answer, right? I'm trying to get an answer to the best of my ability that will actually work. That will also do something else. That won't just put more money into the pocket of large corporations. I want the little guy to win. I want local
Yeah.
people to be happy. I want families to be happy. I want people to stay in my state.
All right, Larry. Something that conservatives, and I don't know if you'd call yourself a conservative, conservatives and libertarians, let's say, often say is, we're going to cut money from the budget, and that's how we're going to be fiscally sound. Now, normally, when a politician says that, they
Mhm.
are full of shit, and they don't
Correct.
actually know what they're talking about when it comes
Yep.
to, well, either they're cowardly and they don't want to say what they're going to cut, or they just don't know
Mhm.
what they're going to cut. Right now, you
Correct.
have said on your website, you gave a specific number, which makes me think, okay, this guy knows exactly what he wants to cut, and I want to hear about it. You said you can cut $11 billion from the state budget. That's say between 5 and 10% of the state budget any given year. What exactly do you cut? Why do you cut it? And go from there.
Yeah, you absolutely can. Now, to be forward, that's 2018 numbers. So I'm not trying to dodge. So please accept this. I'm not trying to dodge. Still, a lot of my policy page is from 2018. Only about maybe 1/3 of it has been updated for 2022. So some of those numbers are off. I believe the number now is actually 16 billion, not 11. I'm not, please don't quote me that, but I think it is there. My team is putting together numbers now to come up with that because how New York State law works, we have to petition to get in the ballot. And we've been focusing on a 5-week blitz coming up next week to get in the ballot. So policy has not been updated as fast as I would like it to update. So I'm not trying to dodge, but say that number may be off, if that makes sense. Am I at least being clear with my excuse?
Well, yeah, I mean, with inflation and stuff, you'd expect it to be higher if it's a 4-year-old
Yes.
number.
So I think it's more like either 14 or 16 billion that we can cut. And there are several ways you can cut that. One of them, obviously, well, before I go to cutting, I do want to go to cutting, but you're right. I want to give you credit for what you just said. The vast majority of people who talk about cutting can't do it. And I rarely do it. In fact, I hardly ever talk about cutting because if you just cut taxes, one of two things happens. One, you gain more debt, right? Because people need to pay for the services that the government wants. So you just get more debt. Or number two, someone else pays the burden. So you get rid of the business tax. So now income tax pays. Or you get rid of income tax and now private tax pays, or whatever, or fines and fees, or civil asset forfeiture. If something happens to where someone else pays for it. So that's why I really talk about cutting. So what I often talk about is finding ways of making money other than taxation. So the way you can cut is when you find other ways to pay for something. So one of those ways is leasing out naming rights to infrastructure, right? So for an example, we have about a dozen bridges or so in New York City that we could probably lease out naming rights to. So say one as an example, RFK Bridge, or which is actually RFK Bridge is all in New York City. George Washington is New Jersey and New York, but you could lease the naming rights. So instead of it becoming the RFK Bridge, now it's a
Oh
3M
man,
Bridge, the
I don't know,
Kellogg's Bridge.
Larry. I don't know, Larry. I don't know if people are going to be too kind on renaming the George Washington Bridge the AT&T Bridge. If I'm honest,
Yeah, but you know how much it costs to cross that bridge?
I don't know.
$15. $15 to cross that bridge. Yes, $15 to cross that bridge. And when you get into the MTA, you got a piece of shit MTA system that doesn't work with a damn and still costs you $3 to get on. So you cannot like that all day, but give me a better answer than $15 across that bridge. Yeah, I have one. We name that damn thing the 3M Bridge and take away the tolls. And now take some of the money that we get every year and put towards paying it down so the
Now,
average person doesn't
really,
have to
really
spend
quick
$3
though,
for a
Larry. Hold on.
subway.
Well, hold on,
Yes,
but because at least so to be fair, Texas is a
please.
lot different than New York, where I'm from.
Yes.
But when we have tolls, it's because that's at least partially privately constructed, you know, piece of
Mhm.
infrastructure, right?
Yep.
Now in New York, are the tolls that you're paying, are they going to the public coffers, or are these privately developed and
Oh,
maintained
no.
projects?
This is okay. Let me, this is funny you say this. No, this all goes into the general fund, which is being horribly managed. Let me give you the example that should be clear on how bad it's managed. Florida has more people than New York.
Now
They
it
have no
does. Yeah.
state, yes, they have no state income tax, and their budget is half. They have half of our budget with no state income tax and more people than us. Not just that, both Texas, that your state, and Florida have gained congressional representatives because you've gained so many people. People are rushing to you, not us. We've lost 2 million people in the past 10 years. So we're just taking that money to keep paying our debt. We are one of the highest. We have one of the highest debts in the entire country. No, we just throw our money in the garbage with terrible, terrible policies and ideas. So no, that money doesn't go to private company. Well, it does go to private companies through grifting. Sorry, it first goes to the government, then the government grifts and gives it to private companies. But no, it does not directly go to private companies. It goes right in to the coffers.
Right, and that makes more sense, yeah, because if this was a privately developed piece of infrastructure, then obviously they can call it whatever they want, and they can charge however much they want, right?
Yep.
But yeah, if this is just general revenue, then that's totally different. Yeah, to be honest, I suppose it's ultimately a small issue. I worked actually on a local on a let's say a policy board that tried to do something similar with infrastructure development. Now, to be fair, the infrastructure that we were talking about was way less famous than the infrastructure that you're talking about. So using naming rights as a way to alleviate costs might be a little bit different. I just do see a lot of pushback in that regard. However, with going back to the point though, cutting programs and cutting, budgets, right? So what do you cut, Larry? What do you cut? Why do you cut it? Where do we go? How do we find that 15 billion?
I'm giving you the answers, right? You don't just cut. You find ways of raising money so you can cut.
Right. Well, yeah, but no, I get it.
I'm not cutting programs. I'm not cutting programs. I'm cutting the budget, not programs. You're thinking I'm cutting programs. I'm not cutting programs. I'm cutting the budget by finding other ways of raising money, so you don't have to pay for it through taxation.
No. But
you can pay for other things.
Well, you're talking about cutting the deficit, basically, right? But when you say we're going to cut 11 billion from the state budget, that doesn't. Well, I guess it doesn't. I get what you're saying now. If your clarification is, I'm not cutting programs, I'm just alleviating the deficit. That's very different. Because obviously, you understand why that's different. Obviously,
look, people need services. It's not like I want people to be in the freaking streets. I don't want all the grifting that we have, which is tons of it. I also don't want what we have, which is in general rule, government is a monopoly, right? It's a monopoly. That means now when we have a monopoly, if it sucks, it just sucks. But I want to create other ways of creating community to support the people who need to be supported. Right now, we do a terrible job of that, right? One of what we often say is, well, we have some nonprofits, but the nonprofits are funded by the government with government grants, which means all they are government agencies that are not unionized. So we have non-unionized government workers is what we've done. That doesn't make any sense to me. Either make them government employees, make them an agency, which I'm not for, or let the community actually support itself and allow it to. And one idea we have that I think is an interesting one is when you send your check in every year, you can, if you want to, take $250 of your own money if you want to, that you would be sending to the government, and instead send it to a nonprofit in New York State. If you send it to a local nonprofit in the county, it's up to $500. So you might say, well, $500, Larry, that's not much. It isn't. But if 1,000 people do it, or 10,000 people do it, well, now we got some cash. And now someone can start up something that this community needs. Do they need people to fix the roads? Do they need people to start a private school? Do they need people to take care of childcare? What does the community require? Right? Do they need another facility for their elderly? Whatever the community requires, they can start that up if they want to. Most communities will not do any of it. They'll just sit back and hang out and do what the government has told them to do for decades. But a couple communities will, because it's always early adopters. And as they begin to start up, they're going to see a difference. And the difference is if the community team does a bad job, they don't get any money next year. So they have to provide some type of success or they fail. Now, the government option is still there. So you get to fall back to government if it doesn't work. I'm not taking away the government option. But if the community option does well, people learn that. Right now, when government fails, government just gets more money. Government's price for failure is a bigger budget. But when a community fails, then it goes under, which is a good thing because now you have to make them become better while you have still the government place to fall back, the safety net. Eventually, over time, and most of my answers, if you've noticed, they're not short-term answers because the damage this state's been dealt has been over decades. They're longer-term answers. They're cultural changes, environmental changes to get communities back in action. The COVID lockdown showed us how community is not prepared to support itself in most parts of this country, particularly my state. So community has to be able to support itself. So if you start creating those options, either government gets better, awesome, or government goes away, also awesome. But either way, the community is still served.
Yeah, and that makes some sense. A quick aside here. Do you like the idea of democracy dollars? The Yang proposal, give people $100 to give to a candidate they like.
Well, I don't know if you know this, but Yang endorsed me.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that.
Oh yeah. Forward party endorsement completely. I'm a forward party endorsed candidate. Yes. So somebody's liking what I'm saying, but yes, this is actually true. So, and you might say, well, Larry, why in the world would the forward party endorse a libertarian? Because I'm a third party candidate, which he knows is critical. It's the only way of changing things, period, without question. The left-right paradigm is destroying us. And I know each side thinks they're better than the other. If you're a lefty or righty, you're not. Whoever's listening, you're not. You're not better than the other. You think you are, but you're not, because nothing's going to get done. The elites who are controlling you on both sides don't care about you. They care about their own power. And the only way to hold them accountable is by having a third party that's effective, that does something. The third party does not have to control everything. It just has to be powerful enough to where they have to stop just going other guy bad, stopping the left-right paradigm, and now things will change. So now, do I like the democracy dollars things? What I actually like is what I've been talking about. It's one of my policies I've been talking about. I called it, what did I call it? I changed the name of it recently. It was called the SUS, which I thought was funny, which was the step-up stipend. And now I call it the GIB, which is the graduated income bump. And what that is that's not necessarily the flat fee of everyone gets dollars. Again, you hear me say all the time, I don't want to be supporting the millionaires and billionaires. What I want to be doing is I want to be supporting people who need the cash influx. So this basically looks at about $18,000 as a standard income for every New Yorker. That's the number we picked because it's very close to the poverty level. I think poverty level is like 18.5 or something like that. It's in that area. So we picked $18,000 because it's close to the poverty level. So that's $1,500 per month. So every New Yorker gets $1,500 per month. However, for every dollar you make, you lose 50 cents of your bump. So you're now able to step up and slowly make more money up until $36,000 in New York State.
Yeah.
Now, that also,
it sounds like a negative income tax, basically.
It is exactly a negative income tax. That's what libertarians, and Milton Friedman was okay with negative income tax. He was not okay with UBI, and most libertarians are not okay with UBI. Some are.
Look, I've
I've
said for a long time, there's a libertarian conservative argument for a negative income tax or a UBI, frankly. Give people the cash, let them do what they want with it, and you'd imagine that if you're starving, you're not going to spend it on nonsense, right? You're going to buy the food anyway. So,
well, the issue with UBI in general, why most libertarians are against it, is because no one has actually said, I want a UBI and you end all other bureaucracy. If someone actually said that, you would have more libertarians on board. You would. If you
were to say, we're going to get...
No, Yang didn't say that initially. He's changed.
He did.
Initially,
he did. His platform was that you had the choice between your regular welfare benefits or UBI. And obviously, in theory, a lot of people are going to, fall off the government system, the government services, right? That was the original Yang proposal. And negative income tax makes more sense as a replacement for welfare anyway, because it's
100%.
It helps lower income people disproportionately. So,
and
we agree there.
It doesn't throw money at the wealthy. If you do that, and then you also say no income tax for anyone who makes $36,000 or less, then none of your income's taxed till you make $36,001, and then that $1 is taxed, right? So there's $2, and the $2 is taxed.
Yeah, and that avoids the middle, what's it called? The middle squeeze, where like you're just high income enough to not qualify for any welfare.
Absolutely. Well, what I'm trying to avoid, which is the system right now. The system right now creates literally, benefit cliffs. The second I make $3 more, now I lose everything. With this negative income tax plan, I like GIB better because negative has negative in it. See, GIB is nicer. SUS is funny and GIB is nice. So that's why I like those two. But the point being, you don't lose federal benefits if you still have them, right? You still get federal benefits. So I'll put you in a better spot to get up and move out. But it also helps people, which I'm most concerned about, as I don't know if I told you, I focus a lot on ex-cons. and people who are broken by family court. And often those two overlap. So people who are broken from family court often lose their jobs, can't make money, get crushed by the court system. People who are or imprisoned or addicts, even their resumes are broken. It's hard for them to get jobs. So when they want to retrain themselves, it's tough to retrain yourself or get that new job or that internship when you got to eat. But if you've got some type of negative income tax, now you can make that happen. So I also add that employers who employ felons, they don't pay any state payroll tax for 2 years.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was
So
something I saw that, and that was one of the things I pointed out, and it's like, there's a lot of stuff on the Larry Sharpe platform that, progressives can certainly get on board with, right? So it's
sure.
not a, this is not again, this isn't an abolish the state kind of, platform or anything like that. So I mean, it's
Well,
a
what
little bit
the
more
problem that we
agreeable.
have, and this is, and you bringing this up is important. I want to bring this up for your audience in particular. Our society has somehow said that libertarians are by default conservative. That's simply not true. There are conservative libertarians and there are progressive libertarians. The difference is not whether you're conservative or whether you're progressive. The difference is, do you want to use centralized control? Do you want to use government to make this stuff happen? If you say yes, I think government should force this, you're not a libertarian. If you think no, I think we should all be liberal or conservative, but I don't want government to force it, you're libertarian. That's the difference. There are tons of, you remember something, libertarians were for marriage equality in 1972. We were for marriage equality in 1972. We were for cannabis legalization decades before Obama became, his idea obviously became, enlightened all of a sudden. We were way before that. So there's a lot of issues where many libertarians are very liberal.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. Are you pro-choice?
I am, but I'm anti-abortion.
Well,
So
yeah, sure. I mean, I don't think
no,
anybody.
not
Yeah.
yeah, sure. I want to be clear on this. That's not a thing I say. I speak about how I hate abortion. I speak about how I don't want it to happen ever. I made a promise in New York State that if I am the governor, there will be less abortions in New York State. But I just know that government can't do it well at all. If we make abortion illegal, all we will do is punish poor women. I don't want to punish poor women. That's
Well,
all
yeah,
we'll
yeah.
do.
Well, the
So,
reason I
but
say
do
yeah, sure. Well,
but what I
quickly
want to
though.
do is I want to take steps to actively make less abortion, which means we should absolutely have contraception without prescription, obviously, and easy to get. We should absolutely make surrogacy easy, adoption easy. In New York State, it's a disaster. In fact, it was illegal. Surrogacy was illegal in New York State till like last year. So we have to make surrogacy legal and easy. We have to make adoption easy also. We do those things, I'm in. But I'm not about pro-choice walk away. No. Pro-choice because government can't do it well, but I am anti-abortion.
Well, when I say yeah, sure, what I mean is that I don't think there's any Democrat that is like counter protesting the anti-abortion protesters and being like, we love when people have to get abortions. It's like I mean,
No,
pretty
but
much
they
every
won't.
Democrat is.
But they won't. They either won't do anything, or what will happen is many people who are on the left who are pro-choice. To be forward, the average American doesn't actually care. They doesn't affect their daily life. The average American does not care at all. But Americans who will openly say they're pro-choice, many times they feel like pro-choice is pro-woman, and they will be as aggressive as they can. Right? They'll be as aggressive as they can to promote it because they promote it as a pro-woman stance. So I think there is a difference in how you think. There are
Yeah.
much more nuances than just pro-life and pro-choice.
Well,
So
sure. I mean, I'd say I think it's
yes,
normally at least in my experience, right? It's normally the Democrats that are advocating for like free contraceptive and prenatal care and stuff like that. So I mean, I think that
yes,
I agree that
yes.
there's you know there's a wing of the conservatives and the Democrats that are the conservatives are pro life until you're born and then they let you die on the streets of poverty, and then the Democrats might. Maybe they don't fulfill all their promises, but in terms of rhetoric, I think the Democrats do offer a more holistic view of sort of
Yeah,
children and
I would agree.
childcare and stuff like that.
I think you're
All
right.
right, you mentioned welfare, so you mentioned create an insurance product for the
Yeah.
poor. Um, in order to alleviate their dependency on welfare. I don't understand what this means.
Yes,
How
and
does this
that's
get
and that's one
created?
of the things from 2018. The negative income tax replaces that.
All right, never mind. Let's drop it then.
Yes, that was that before I went negative income tax. That's where I was creating a similar system that was done via insurance.
Okay, I got you.
But
Well,
now I'm just making the negative income tax paid for, by the way, by you and I discussed it before, by a trust, which is the New York State Social Trust, creating a social trust similar to, Singapore, Norway, Saudi
yeah,
Arabia. Hopefully not like Saudi Arabians, but anyway, conceptually like that. But
yeah, just a
yeah, like
sovereign
that.
wealth fund. Yeah.
Correct. Right.
Um,
To pay for that. So that was before the negative income tax.
all right. So you mentioned this is one thing, man. So I hope this isn't outdated on your website as well. But you mentioned for low level and non-violent offenders
Mhm.
offer lower bail terms. But then naturally
Yes.
that raises the question. Well, if they're low level and non-violent, why require them to have bail at all?
Because sadly, what we find is repeat offenders keep offending even with low. For example, they do things like they're nonviolent, so they go into a bank with a note and rob a bank. Then they come back out and rob a bank again. They literally do it 6, 7 times. So you have to have it to where if they're going back to the bank to rob the bank again, you gotta put them away. I mean, you can't have a guy robbing banks every day, right? And that's not violent. There's no weapon. They just walk in with a piece of paper and say, "Give me the money." That's robbing banks. So that's why you have to have something. The issue with bail is, are they a repeat offender or not? First time offenders, we should be very lenient on them for first time offenders. When after first time offenders, you do want to give the judge some leniency on whether you want to be, putting an ankle bracelet on them or not. Right. So that's an issue. Did the guy get arrested twice for beating up his girlfriend? Maybe that guy shouldn't be back out again. That's violent. I got it. So easy day. But what happens when he's not being violent? What if he's just shoplifting, which is now in many cases not even a real crime anymore in many cities? So he just shoplifts. Well, let him back out again. But he can let a guy shoplift 6, 7 times, and to be forward, that's actually happened in my state. That's not a thing I'm making up. That's not rhetoric. That's actually happened. And that's why if it's whether it is violent or not, if they're multiple offenders, you have to put them away. I know it sounds bad,
Right,
but you
right.
have
So
to.
you're right.
You
So
have to.
you're saying it sounds like the addendum that should be added to the website is repeat low level and nonviolent offenders. But if you're smoking marijuana or whatever, well, it's
Correct.
legal in New York. But if you're doing coke and you get caught or something, maybe not require bail for that. That makes some
Well,
sense.
but as a libertarian, to be clear, as a libertarian, possession's not a crime, right? I know it's a crime, but as a libertarian, it's not a crime. I'm not going to prosecute those anyway. Having a substance should never be a crime. Hurting someone to get your substance is a crime. Stealing to get your substance is a crime. Physically having your substance, why would anyone prosecute that? That's a dumb thing to prosecute.
Well, you could control state offices, right? But then cities could just work with federal offices to prosecute that kind of thing if they wanted, I guess. That makes it harder, don't get me wrong, and there'd be less prosecutions if you did that, but
100%.
it's
So now I'm
you know.
forcing the federal government to crack down on weed smokers.
Well, weed is legal in New York, right? So I think
Not federally.
well, okay, yeah, but nobody I don't even know if there's any examples of like federally prosecuted people
That's my
smoking weed
point.
in legal states.
That
Well,
is
but
well
it's
what they yes, but
well
what
with
they do is
cocaine though, it would be
how
different,
it
I think.
works. But how it works is when they arrest you for something else, then they find weed on you, and then throw 7, 8 charges on top of you for the weed. That's what happens, right? They're not arresting you for the weed. They're arresting you for something else. Then you have the weed on you, so they, punish you for
Yeah,
the weed now.
they it's like, okay, well, we found you with an unregistered gun, and then you had weed, and
Correct.
now that's ownership of a gun and then weed, and now you've got 35 years for driving over the speed limit, basically. Yeah.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah, no, I get
Correct.
what you're
That's how
saying
the
there.
feds get you. Yep.
It's how they get you.
Mhm.
All right, so that makes a lot of sense. All right, certificates of need and healthcare.
Yes.
So classic problem in the healthcare market is, well, it's moral hazard, right? So people who are shielded from sort of the risks and costs associated with their actions, right? And so this is where things like co-pays and deductibles. And I
Sure.
assume I live in Texas, great free state. I've never heard of certificates of need. But I
Yep.
assume that's the idea of a certificate of need is basically getting a reference before you can go into your, get
No.
your. broader access
Yeah.
for
I'm
healthcare.
going to blow you and your people away. No. Certificate
All
of
right.
need means in New York State, if you want to have another hospital bed, if you want to open up a hospital, if you want to open up a doctor's office, as long as it's not cosmetic or considered non-essential, the state has to tell you you can. The state decides where every hospital goes. The state decides how many hospital beds there are. The state decides everything. So literally, if there were 14 doctors that want to start their own hospital or their own medical facility, whatever, the state has to say yes. The state must go, well, yep, there's X number of people here, so you may start a hospital or you may start a doctor's office.
Well,
That's
really
certificate of
quick.
need.
So hold
Yes,
on. So here's my clarifying question, because that sounds
please.
crazy.
Yes, because it
Uh,
is.
right, right. But here's my question: is this just tied to a standard licensing process? Right? Is it like, okay, you do this because we need to prove it's like a quality? You're not just going to open some shack and call it a hospital, right? Um,
Nope.
is that what this is, or is this literally
Nope.
just
It is
basically we're
controlling where hospitals and medical personnel go. But also, New York State has another stupid law, which is you may only practice medicine in New York State if you got a license in New York State. Also,
yeah,
insanely stupid.
I read that on your website, and that
Insanely
seems
stupid.
ridiculous.
And
Yeah, I mean,
the COVID problems we had, and we had many of them. We had many problems, but that was a huge one. I was talking about fixing this 2 years before COVID hit. No one listened to me. Now we said, well, we don't have enough hospital beds. We don't have enough hospital beds. Well, whose fault is that? It's the government's fault. The government decides every hospital bed. We had 50,000 hospital beds across my state in 2018. In 2020, 50,000 hospital beds. Now, 50,000 hospital beds. That's all we have, even through COVID. Even through COVID, we changed nothing. We did pull back our rules on letting other medical personnel come after COVID, after 2021. So after a year of death, then we said, well, okay, fine. If you got a license in Connecticut, I guess you can come. Even though we have the
well,
most
yeah.
compact, biggest city in the country, we still held on to that insanity. This is stupid. It is old school. It is used by large hospital groups to control and monopolize. That's all it's used for. This is cronyism. That's all it is. It needs to go away.
Yeah, the medical industry, you can call it healthcare or medical nimbyism, right? Where the
Yeah.
Congress, I think, sets a cap on how many, I want to say how many licenses get handed out every year for nurses and doctors, right? Which is just a cartel essentially.
100%.
And yeah, I mean, I agree with you on the liberalization of those rules. Like, for instance, I think it's weird. Like, if you're a medical doctor and you were trained in the UK, you have to redo your residency to come to America, and to me, it's just like, I mean, don't we trust the British to be training their doctors appropriately? It just seems a little weird.
Yes. It's insanely
So
stupid. Makes no sense at all.
yeah, same
None.
thing with like Canada and France and stuff. So
Yes.
it sounds like New York just has a state level thing, which is even weirder.
Even
'cause,
worse.
yeah.
Even dumber.
Well, hey, those darn Texans don't know how to give medical care to their people. All right, what are you thinking, Larry? Come on, you want
Clear.
a Texas doctor working on you?
Don't want one of those crazy people. Of course not.
Yeah, showing up with their
Yes.
cowboy hats and shit.
They might like kick me with a boot or something. Isn't that what the Texans do? I don't know.
Exactly.
So
Their
yes,
spurs, the spurs are going to pierce the oxygen tanks or whatever. But
100%.
all right. Well, that seems pretty agreeable. Okay, so so this is something that I found perplexing on your website. Just because it didn't make sense to me. But you can explain it, I'm sure. So
Mhm.
you mentioned that for the healthcare, basically the healthcare debit account, the idea, right?
Right.
So
Yep.
people. What they would get for Medicaid, put it into a healthcare debit account, and then they're more
Yep.
accountable towards the. Well, it's a debit card, so
Yep.
you're connecting people to the direct cost of their care, so they're going to shop around a bit more, right?
Sure.
However, and this leads to some better incentives and better alignment of incentives and less market failure, right?
Yep.
And you talk about transparency requirements and all this kind of stuff.
Sure.
But then part of your website also says, well, if you run out of money in your healthcare debit account, you can just go back to Medicaid.
Sure.
Now,
I don't want you to be screwed. What if you have a catastrophic problem, right?
Well, yeah, but I just
So
to
I don't want
me,
to be screwed.
yeah, sure. But it just sounds like if the idea is that this is going to save us money, it's going to align
Yep.
incentives, it's going to make people care about the cost of their care in a real way.
Yep. Mhm.
Well, why would they? They can just run the card however they want and then go back to Medicaid, right? It doesn't sound like
Okay, good. Let me no, that's a great question. Let me explain why. I give you the best example is in New York City. This is across the country, but it is crystal clear in New York City. More and more of the best doctors no longer take insurance because it costs too much. So they wind up just saying, no, you pay directly to me. That's it. So now it's creating a two-tiered system. The wealthy who just either pay cash and or who have great insurance and they get reimbursed a chunk from their insurance company. They provide the receipt. I don't know if your audience knows about these kind of Cadillac plans. You can go anywhere you want. You provide a receipt and then you get a portion reimbursed, if not all of it. So the best doctors now are going towards that route. They're not taking insurance. They don't take Medicaid, Medicare. They don't take insurance in general. They don't, but no Medicare, they don't take that at all. Trying to find a Medicare, Medicaid doctor is becoming harder and harder. So what happens in general is if you go to a doctor who doesn't take any insurance or anything like that, you have an appointment at 3:00. You're seeing latest 3:05. The doctor actually talks to you and says, okay, what's going on? How you eating? How you sleeping? What's your stress level? And then they give you what they think is best and they send you on your way. But when you go to a doctor who takes some kind of Medicare, Medicaid, or insurance, your appointment's at 3:00. You get seen at 4:45 because they stack everybody up because they don't get paid much from Medicare, Medicare. So they double, triple stack everybody. When you see at 4:45, he sees you for 10 minutes. And every single time it ends with either a procedure, a test, or prescription. Why? Because he or she gets paid by you being sick and doing things. So they keep doing things. So it always ends in one of those three. In fact, I've seen doctors, you probably know them too, who prescribe Tylenol or prescribe aspirin, even though you could just walk to the corner and buy it because, well, it's because they get paid. They get rewarded for more prescriptions.
Yeah.
So you just keep doing it, right? So people are getting that. So what will happen if all of a sudden I know, and actuaries know about how much money you're going to spend, right? So let's say you're a male who's 30 years old and you have one pre-existing condition and they know, okay, great. You're going to spend $2,000 a year on medical, whatever that is. So now you have a debit card that can be spent at any medical facility for $2,000. So you're probably going to go to better doctors because you like them, because your friends tell you about them. You see the wealthy people get it. So poor people get a wealthy doctor. I want that. They just swipe the card. But more than only that happens. Now doctors who don't take insurance can go, wait a minute. So I can get Medicaid, Medicare money without all the admin that it takes? I don't have to have 7 admin people plus hire someone. Some of your audience may not know this. It's literally an industry. People who go have to chase Medicaid, Medicare, insurance companies for money for doctors. They get a cut. They become collections guys. That's a thing. They make millions doing this. So I don't have to have that guy. I can just do it. Oh my God. They will begin to cater towards people who are not wealthy, which is what I want. I want the working poor and the average middle class person to get some good service. So they'll go there. Now, once, say you go, well, I don't care. I'm just going to swap my $2,000. Great. Your next doctor's visit is back at the Medicaid, Medicare guy. You can't go to the other guy now. So why would you want to? You're going to want to go to the best doctor. Over time, what should happen is the best doctors are going to lower their prices to match with the people who are coming in, and the poor and middle class get better service and care more about their health care. That's what should happen over time and make everything better. My example is one more thing. There's a new trend now that's happening. It's based like a gym membership for doctors. I think the most popular company right now is Forward, if I'm not mistaken. The name of the company is Forward. You pay like $150 a month or something like that. And you get to go as much as you want and things like that. So more people with that debit card could apply for that type and to sample that too, which would support that type of healthcare. And before you know it, the prices should come down. And you would say, well, Larry, how do you know that? Because there's a secondary medical market right next to the one we're in. And that's the non-essential market. That's the cosmetic dentistry, LASIK eye care, body enhancements. These are just as dangerous or, intensive as others, right? And doctors are there, no certificates of need, none of this stuff whatsoever. Yet in every single case, and I mean every case, prices have come down, accessibility has increased to everybody, or more people, not everybody, but more people, and service has gotten better. When I was a kid, LASIK eye surgery, you had to pay per eye. That's how expensive it was. Now everybody gets it. No one got cosmetic dentistry when I was a kid, except like movie stars. Everybody gets it now, right? Now everybody gets it. So that's my example of it actually working. The more you do this, you will have better healthcare. When it comes to what the government runs, education and healthcare, prices have gone up, less accessibility, unhappy people, bankruptcy, more expensive than ever, and crappy outcomes. Why would I want to keep doing that?
Yeah, I get what you're saying there. I think that I think one of the troubles with that so everything you said is internally logical, right? It's
Hmm.
consistent, right? I just think that where I think a lot of sort of more free market oriented
Hmm.
healthcare advocates would come in has a problem is that we can reasonably use the American healthcare system and say it's a lot of problems, right?
Yep.
So, when you're spending 30 to 50% more and you don't live 30 to 50% longer, well, I mean,
Hmm.
there's probably some issues, right?
100%.
And it's not because everyone in America is fat or because of malpractice insurance. I mean, those things matter, right? But
Sure.
the
I'm sure
big
they're part of it.
right.
There's a part.
There's structural problems, right?
Yep. 100%.
And at least for me, right, the structures of healthcare systems that have worked around the world, I mean, they're not the structures that you're describing, right?
Hmm. Correct.
And for me, as a risk averse person, right, you want to be as responsible as possible with taxpayer
Mhm.
dollars. I'm going to want to see what other people have done and try
Government's
and
never done that.
never done what? What do you mean?
Been responsible with taxpayer money.
Well, hold on, hold on. Well, I don't want to get sidetracked here, but I obviously I
Okay.
disagree with that, right? But I was just going to say that, for me, being
Okay.
as trying to be as responsible as possible with taxpayer money, right? Well, because that's what you're describing. Your
Yes.
healthcare debit account is funded with tax money, so I would want to look at what other countries have done and see what they've done and if it's worked out. And it seems like every other country,
Yep.
um, they don't do what you're describing. They have basically either heavily regulated insurance, they've got a public option, they've got single payer, they've got national service, national
Mhm.
healthcare service, right? And so, what makes you think that this innovation is going to work? Are there empirical
Yep.
examples of this, right? I mean, what are
Yeah.
you basing this off of?
Sure. I'll base it off of three things. Number one, I'm actually not saying you're wrong. What I'm saying is our country's not prepared to go there yet. Maybe will it go there in 50 years? Maybe 20 years? Maybe. I don't know. Not now. That's just, that's the we've been talking about single. Bernie's been yelling single payer for what, 20 years now? How long? They tried it in Vermont, it didn't work. They talked about it in California, and then they backed away from California. California said no to it. I'm just saying our country's not there. If that's the right answer, and maybe it is, I feel like it can't be the right answer. Like my ideology tells me it cannot be the right answer. But let's say I'm
Sure, sure.
wrong. Let's say I'm wrong and it's the right answer, right? I could be wrong. It's possible. Anyone who thinks that's happening in the next 5 years does not understand the finance industry in this country. And you're involved in it. You know what I'm talking about. You might say theoretically, it's not happening. This is the best step we're going to get to having a better system. Not just that, we have legacy issues and a legacy of being stupid, of making sure that we've been connecting our healthcare to our job for 70 years because of an idiot government program to try to control wages after World War II. So that legacy we have that others don't have. That's a cultural, social legacy. Other countries don't have that stupidity that we did. Government trying to control wages. It was dumb and it made things worse. So we also have that. So I'm talking about a thing that can actually function in our place that can work now. The wealthy are not going to accept single payer. Not going to happen. So they will either say, you guys have single payer and we're going to pay our own. So if they pay their own, there'll be
Well,
private doctors for the
yeah,
wealthy.
public
Everyone else
option.
gets single
Sure.
payer, right? That's one. Or they're going to say, well, you can do, single payer, or you can do insurance. Well, the best doctors, are they going to go on insurance? No, they're not. How do I know that? I'm looking at New York City now. I'm seeing it
Well,
now.
I think in a true single payer system, you would be forced to accept it. There wouldn't be an option to accept the government insurance. Now, to be fair, I think that in Canada there is you can do cash options in Canada, but it's pretty
100%.
sparse, and most people really like the single payer system. But I get what you're saying. So it's more of a political reality, right? We're just
That's
trying
what
to
I'm
go with
saying.
what people will accept. I get that. I guess what I worry about is just that when we talk about taking a bunch of people who are currently in one market and sort of
Mhm.
shifting, well, we could say it's all the healthcare market, but you get what I'm saying, taking them
Yep.
currently in one pool of the market and then shifting all those dollars into another pool. Um, we probably wouldn't imagine that in the short or the medium term, especially with all the regulations regarding, opening new facilities, right? that prices would come down. We'd probably expect in the medium term that prices would actually increase because people are entering that market, and there's probably not the supply to keep up with it in general. However, holistically, with your healthcare plan of making it easier to open clinics and stuff like that, and
Hmm.
making it easier to become a doctor, right? These kind of things might cancel each other out.
In
Here's an
theory, people
overarching.
should in theory people should rush here, right? And the example I'm going to give you. So what am I basing it on? I'm basing it on non-essential medical care. Somehow there's enough doctors for people to get LASIK eye surgery, and no one's controlling that. Somehow there's enough dentists who can, give you cool braces or something, or whatever is whatever the caps of the day are. Somehow you can have body piercings. Somehow there's tons of those people, and they're all getting serviced without me and you controlling it. So why would I assume that's not the case?
Yeah, but that's because
Somehow it's working.
it's working because people presently, like you said, are paying directly those costs a lot of time. Dental insurance is like a scam, right? Dental
Yep.
insurance doesn't even who the hell would logically buy dental insurance, right? Optometry care is largely the same, and which is to say that most people will end up paying out of pocket for most, or at the very least, a majority of their, or either all, or at the very
And
least, a
the
majority of
prices
their.
came down because that's the only way you can solve that problem. When
Well,
you
no,
have
but yeah,
limitations, you become creative. That's
no,
how
I
I
get that.
started this thing that way. That's how
No,
it works.
I get that, right? But again, when we're talking about, the prices are coming down, right? Well,
Mhm.
again, we're not artificially injecting a lot of people into that market. That market is controlled by its own demand curve, right? Which is
Yep.
probably more elastic, and it probably has a higher a lower price threshold for many people, because even though LASIK eye surgeries come down in price, it's still $1,000 or $1,500 an eye or whatever it is, and that's just something that a lot of poor people are just
No, it's a couple hundred
not
bucks.
gonna. Man, I don't know where you live, but I mean, maybe Texas is different, but I think LASIK's a little bit more expensive in my neck of the woods. But
Oh,
um,
okay. It's a couple
it
hundred
might be
bucks.
different. It might be
Yep.
different. But the point is just to say that a lot of that elective
Hmm.
care is expensive, right? And so people aren't necessarily able to afford it. And when you give people thousands of dollars in, taxpayer money to enter that market, it's not that it's a bad thing. I don't think most progressives would be against the idea of giving people more money so that they can afford healthcare. Rather, it's just that, well, when we expect a bunch of people to be entering a market that is relatively, you could say, rigid, right? That supply probably isn't coming online very quickly, and so in the medium term, we'd probably expect prices to go up and not down, right? That's all that I'm saying.
I mean, I would think the opposite, but maybe I'm wrong. I mean, lots of people wanted LASIK eye surgery, and the
Well,
price came down.
you're shifting the demand curve to the right, right? And but supply isn't able to come online to match that new demand, and so prices come up. I mean, that's what's happening right now with the supply chain crunches, right? Demand increased, but supply decreased, and so prices go up. I mean, that's
Well,
how inflation is caused.
you're also assuming that, and this is my point from earlier, most people aren't going to take advantage of this. There's going to be early adopters, right? The things I'm talking about, to your point, are not simple, easy things, right?
Wait,
People have to make a change. So
who wouldn't
some
take
people will try it.
who wouldn't take a free several $1,000s to go spend on what you want? That sounds like everyone would take that. Maybe I'm
Not when they,
misunderstanding the eligibility of
no,
the
no,
program.
not when they may be accustomed to their own doctor and just going back to the same one again. Doesn't mean they would just might change their doctor's office. Some wouldn't, some would. I don't think just because I go, hey, you can now do a thing, doesn't mean everybody will go do the thing. Some of them won't believe it. They won't know how to do it. They'll feel awkward. They go, but I got my insurance. It's a
Mm.
change. Some
I
people
don't
will
know.
jump
I
on
mean,
board. Some people won't.
I don't know. I've got restaurants that I prefer and that I like, and if you were to give me a
Mhm.
card that said, hey, hey, Econboi, you can go to all these other restaurants that are really, really expensive. Well, I mean, I like Taco Bell and I like this local steakhouse, but I mean, fuck,
Sure,
I'm gonna take that card and go eat me some fancy dinners, right? So I
you
see,
might.
I get
Yeah,
what you're saying. I get what you're saying.
yeah.
I just, I feel like this will end up. I remember. Do you know who Matt Brunig is?
Rings a bell, but I'm not sure.
He's a socialist think tank researcher, and something that he pointed out that I thought was actually a very interesting point was that the Democrats' childcare or the Democrats' pre-K plan probably increased the cost of pre-K,
I don't doubt that.
because when you end up giving a lot of people money to do a thing, that's not a bad thing. It's just that if we imagine that preschools can't open immediately like lemonade stands, right? Demand shifting to the right, costs are going to go up. But people, to be fair, are probably better off because now they have pre-K than they otherwise wouldn't. It's better to send your kid to a crowded preschool than maybe no preschool at all, right? And so
Depends upon the mom.
Well, sure, yeah, the mom might just take care of it themselves, but
Yep.
So I don't know. Those are some of my
No, I'm
concerns with this
agreeing with
healthcare
you.
care plan.
But if you notice, that isn't the only part. The other part is also an certificate of need, make it easy to open up, facilities,
Right,
letting
yeah,
people
that's
from
a
other states
holistic
come. And it's not going to happen overnight. If look, the only way I win this thing, and there is a chance, if I win this thing, it'll be because Kathy Hochul, my current governor, makes a massive mistake. And if she makes those massive mistakes, then people are going to go, oh my God, I don't want to vote for Republican because Democrats hate Republicans. And New York State is 3-1 Democrat to Republican. So Republican has no chance of victory. So they go, oh my God, I'm so mad at Kathy Hochul. You know what? Let me throw my vote at this guy, Larry Sharpe. If that happens, I'll win with 35% of the vote. If that actually does happen, people will see it. They'll know what's going to happen. They'll know what I'm trying to achieve. This will take months to actually put into place, and people will be able to respond. The market will see this coming a mile away. That makes any sense, right? The market will see this coming a mile away. It's not like I'm going to be like, okay, tomorrow, done. I wish I could do that. That'd be awesome. But the market will see this a mile away.
Well, I think that the market might see it, but those regulatory pressures are kind of it's kind of multiplying by zero, right? I get what you're saying though. That kind of brings me to another point, which is that so obviously you would recognize your chances of winning are probably less than 50%. Let's say, right? It's an outside shot. However, right, third party candidates have won elections before. It's not the 100%. Most unusual thing.
Does happen. Jesse Ventura in the 90s became governor of Minnesota.
Jesse Ventura, the governor, he was the governor of Minnesota. And there've been more local races and stuff like that. And so my question is, if you win the election with 35% of the vote, similar, a la Jesse Ventura, how are you going to get anything done, right? New York is still going to be a democratically controlled state from top to bottom, basically. And how's a libertarian going to get any? These things were all implemented by Democrats, right? What you're talking about. So why would they repeal all these things just because you got elected? I mean, who cares about Larry Sharpe being governor?
100%. There's three things that we have to remember. The first thing is, if I actually win this thing, look, to be forward, I win if I come in second and beat the Republican, right? That's a win for me. Because if that happens, that shows everybody in the state that we're looking for something else, and they have to pay attention to me, and some of my policies will actually be implemented, right? So even second place is a win for me. When I did Joe Rogan in 2018, at the end of that, he said, Larry, you got some great ideas. You better lock those ideas down. I said, why? He said, people will take them. I said, good. Fix my state. I don't have to run anymore. Good. I'll go back to work. I want my state fixed. So even if I come in second, it's still a win. They start picking up some of these policies and making changes. I want a better state. That's what I want. My state's a disaster. So keep that in mind if we could on one side. Second side, let's say I win this thing. If she makes a big mistake, and she made one already, she literally just got her lieutenant governor arrested this week for corruption. So she's made one already. So there's still hope, right? There's still hope. So if I win this thing, number one is I'll control the governorship. It'll be shocking. The world will be shocked. People will actually listen to what I'm saying because they'll be like, oh my God, New York State has gone libertarian. So off the bat, people will be paying attention to me, number one. But number two, the state Senate is actually very close. It's very close, even. And there are enough state senators who will become libertarian. So we'll be the swing vote. So I will actually control the state Senate. I know this already. They've already told me there'll be enough people who will turn libertarian. We will control the state Senate via swing vote. I will control the governorship. You're right with the assembly. The assembly is heavily Democratic. I'm not going to be able to all of a sudden turn the assembly. However, if I can't get anything done, then I'll just get in my governor's bus and I'll run the government from the bus in all of their territories. And I'll just sit there in their territories and troll them until they stop realizing you have to do what the governor's saying because the people are going to get behind me. Remember, if I actually win this thing, I got a chunk of people behind me. I start putting that pressure on them, they will have to bend on something. And if I got, to be forward, if I got half of my agenda done in 8 years, New York would be an amazing place. I want all of it done in 4 years, and I will try to get all of it done in 4 years. You can guarantee that I will bust my ass, get it all done in 4 years. But if I only got half done in 8, it would still be awesome because the state starts turning away from this one party system that I have right now and when nothing ever gets done. So either way, I get something done. Does that make sense
Okay.
at least?
Yeah, it does make sense. I understand the plan. That's not
Yep.
unreasonable, and there have been examples of legislators becoming libertarians or greens
Yep.
before, for one reason or another. To be fair,
Yep.
and so with regard to something that has always frustrated me with national third parties,
Hmm.
is that they seem to lack focus. If that makes any sense, right? So, to me, right, if I'm the Green Party of America,
Yep.
right, I have to realize I will never win the presidency, at least not in the short run, right? And I'm never going to win any local office because we don't have any sort of central dedication to any of these local offices, right? And so to me, if I was running the National Green Party, what I would say is we need to focus on like one city, right? We need like to fund, we need to have all of our money go towards like one place and have 40% of the people vote for us and we win by plurality. And then we're in office. And then we can actually start showing people what a green government looks like, right? And maybe for the libertarians, that could be New Mexico with Gary Johnson. For the Greens, maybe it's Massachusetts with Jill Stein, like whatever the example is, right?
Hmm.
Um, and so, with regard to running for governor, right? Why not run for the mayor of Albany or something, or a city council seat or something, because
True.
it just seems like governor is such an outside shot, whereas if you could focus this resource and this pulling, you're a nationally recognized libertarian, right?
Hmm.
You have a lot bigger shot of starting small and building out than starting big and going from the top down, right? But that's my thought, right? What
Yep.
obviously you disagree. You're running for governor.
Yep.
Why do you disagree? And why do you choose to run for these sort of higher offices?
I don't necessarily disagree. It depends upon the person, right? So, two things to remember. Many people will not know this, but this is a systemic issue and an individual issue. The individual should run for the highest office that they can run for. I was in a position in 2018 where I could not work for a year. I'm in a position right now where I cannot work for a year. So I'm running for governor because I can do that. But there's something more important. In New York State, the only way I become an official party in New York State is to run for governor. The biggest issue systemically is ballot access rules. And most people have no idea how that works. They always say things like you said, well, run for this, run for that. It's fucking hard to run. And I mean that aggressively when I say that, because they make rules that make it almost impossible for us to even be on the ballot. What I have to do to get on the ballot now, for those of you who might understand this, I have to go out and in 6 weeks, I have to get about 70,000 signatures petition across New York State. It's going to cost me 6 figures, and I have 200 volunteers, and people think I can't make it. It's never been done before. That's the rules they create. No other third party will be on the ballot except me because no one else can afford it unless you are literally a millionaire, a self-made billionaire, or you're a Democrat or Republican. If you're a Democrat or Republican, all you do is go, I went on the ballot. You're on. You're a third party. Go out and find an army. Then you can be on the ballot. That's how it works in most. Some places in the country, it's virtually impossible. What you may not know when it comes to presidential election, the Libertarian Party is the only third party to have 50 state ballot access, I mean on the ballot in all 50 states twice in a
Yeah.
row. The Greens don't do it. They can't do it. They can't do it. It's impossible. And they sue us. Democrats and Republicans literally sue us to throw us off the ballot. The reason why I have to get 70,000 signatures, legally, I only have to get 45. But Democrats and Republicans, I'm going to be very clear on this, will literally take your money that you give them, hire people who will go into the Board of Elections and go through each signature, trying to find a reason for it to be bad to throw me off the ballot. So it's hard to get on the ballot. But if I'm able to do it in New York State, the rule is if I get 45,000 valid signatures within 6 weeks, and then I get 130,000 votes or 2%, whichever is more in the election, then I become an official party. Otherwise, no. So if I don't run for governor, no one can be on the ballot. So in my
Right.
case, I have to run for governor or no one can be on the ballot as libertarian. The state will tell me no. And I'll make it even worse. This is even worse. I did it what the rules were before in 2018. The rules before were 15,000 signatures and 100,000 votes. I'm sorry, 50,000 votes. I broke that and became a party. And then 2 years into it, they went, oh, we're changing the rules. And they changed the rules on me mid-stroke and said, well, you're not that anymore. You're gone. Removed my ballot access. I sued them, and the court said, no, we don't care about you. No. That's what we're up against as third parties. This system is completely broken, completely rigged. You have to do whatever you can to get on the ballot. This system is destroying us left, right, horrible. You said we're not focused? Of course we're not focused. We can't even get in the ballot. And we are attacked like there's no tomorrow. If you had a Democrat, the Democrat running for office talking to her, or the Republican talking to him, they would be able to answer none of your questions. Not one. They would just double talk, speak, and go, Democrats are bad, Republicans are bad. They'd have no answers. And they would still be seen as more valid than I am. So I get what you're saying, but I would ask you, if you know anybody who's run third party, talk to them about, why do you think Yang has left and he's fighting? He sees the same thing I see. If we don't fix this two-party system, the ball game's over. Like, it's over. We have to fix this two-party system. So guys like me who can have to run so that that local person can run and win. But if I don't get out there and become someone that people pay attention to, that other guy or gal never wins. That's why I run.
Right. Yeah, and that makes sense. So you're telling me, if I understand it, if I wanted to run for city council in Albany, I don't know if that's actually a partisan election, but assuming that it is, if I wanted to run for city council in Albany as a libertarian, and it says, Econboi libertarian on the ballot, I cannot do that unless I have a gubernatorial candidate qualified for the gubernatorial ballot.
That's correct. Now, if you want to do it on your own, you can, but you have to get, if I'm not mistaken, I think it's like 1,500 signatures, something like that. Maybe more, 2,000 maybe. I've forgotten the number there. But you will have to go get 2,000 signatures over the course of like whatever, 3-4 weeks, whatever the number. I don't know what the number is for that. Say, for the sake of argument, 5 weeks. So are you gonna not work? Are you just gonna sit outside and try to get 1,500 people to sign a piece of paper for you? You better have an army, or you better be able to pay people to go do it for you. I have to do both. I have 200 volunteers, and I have to pay people. So if you got money to pay people to do it, go ahead, no worries. Or you're gonna not work and sit outside a train station and get 1,000 signatures, so you can get in the ballot. You haven't paid for a Facebook ad. You haven't bought door hangers. You haven't bought signs. You haven't done any TV spots. That's just so you can be on the ballot. Yes, that's what I'm telling you. But if I win and do what I'm not even, if I get the numbers they want, you just get in the ballot. Correct.
Right, that makes sense. Okay, and I guess it's a one-time thing. When you do it once, in theory, if they don't change the rules, you should qualify the next time around.
You should, but they changed the rules on me midstream.
Yeah, you mentioned, they changed the rules on you, which obviously doesn't really help.
Absolutely.
So, this year we've got a bit of a third-party rematch. Howie's running for governor in New York again. I believe he was one of those situations you described where he. I want to say Howie Hawkins from the Green Party, he worked as a UPS driver, I'm pretty sure. And he retired, which actually was the reason he had the time to run for president. So he's running for governor again. Last time he ran for governor, Howie beat you, Larry. He got more votes. He got more votes than you. So are you coming for him this time? You think you're going to beat Howie? What do you predict?
I love Howie. He's my friend. We're both Marines. Big fan of Howie. Sadly, Howie's not going to be able to get in the ballot this time.
You don't think so?
No, he's not going to make. He's not going to. The Green Party doesn't have the same infrastructure that I have. I've been crossing my state for 5 years. I had 15 local county affiliates. Now I have 30 county affiliates. I raised 6 figures. He doesn't have the same infrastructure that I have. I don't think he's going to make it. So
really? Well, he got more votes than you last time. I mean, he's clearly got some infrastructure, right? I mean, he's doing okay.
No, he has the Green Party name in New York State.
I see.
Was the Democrat any better or Republican? No, he's got the Green Party name in New York State.
Right. So you're saying because of these changed in rules, these rule changes, you just don't imagine how he's going to be able to.
Look, I like Howie. I would not, if he gets on the ballot, I'm not fighting him. I'll let him come on the ballot. Come on in. Right. To be forward with you. I would have been happy to see a Green Party person on my slate. Obviously, the 4 people, I'd have taken one. They didn't want to give me one.
What do you mean slate? Maybe I'm.
There's a 4-person slate when you're going for statewide election: governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, controller. And
I see.
I was open to taking a Green Party person on my slate. They didn't want to give me one. They were like, we're going to go on our own. I'm like, you're not going to make it. I'll make this an actual coalition. Give me one. I'll do it. They were like, nope.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously well, I mean, you probably followed it last year. The 2020 Green presidential primary was just, I don't know, leftists just seem to have more infighting, more like public infighting than the libertarians do.
I'm not sure that's true. We're pretty bad.
I don't
too.
know, Larry. Look, the 2020.
I don't know.
I don't know. The 2020 primary was filled with controversy of the Green Party. Now nobody cared because it's the Green Party and nobody was really following it. But not to insult the Greens out there, it's just a very niche issue. But I'm not surprised that the Greens wouldn't want to team up with a libertarian. Obviously it's not a.
I gave him the option.
That's fair. That's fair.
Yang came aboard.
Well, why isn't Yang? I mean, he's supposed to be a party himself. Why isn't he running for something? The four parties.
He probably will, but he's not going to run for governor of New York. He'll run for something else.
Maybe, I guess. I mean, we'll see what Yang does.
He's also looking a smart way. He knows, right? And I'm going to give Yang a lot of credit for this. He knows the duopoly is against us. They do not want, in any way, shape, or form, a third party to have any power. It will force them to actually do what they say. Democrats and Republicans don't do anything they say. I'm not sure they even believe their own lies anymore. They don't, right? If you're a Republican, when the Republicans are in charge, you're supposed to all of a sudden be conservative. They weren't. When the Democrats are in charge, supposed to be liberal. They're not. They keep starting wars. They keep spending money. They don't change a thing. They have different rhetoric, I guess, right? They have different rhetoric, but the country still keeps going to the toilet.
Well, hey, Biden ended a war, to be fair. Let's give him some credit.
I did give him credit, 100%. Yes,
but
100%.
Yes.
Well, if he's about to start another one in Ukraine.
Oh, I don't think Biden's.
I guess he's done with one. He's ready to start another one. I hope not. I hope not.
Biden is the least hawkish president we've had in maybe like ever. Like he's one of the least hawkish ones, I think. At least in modern time, especially because it seemed like his son being deployed really changed him as well.
I don't think Trump wasn't very hawkish though. Trump wasn't very hawkish neither Trump or Biden. The last two presidents haven't been that hawkish compared to Obama and Bush. Obama and Bush was super hawkish compared to Trump.
I don't know.
And, Biden.
I mean, Obama did a lot of drone strikes, but Obama never, drone struck a Iranian official in an Iraqi airport like Trump did.
That was just weddings. No big deal. Just weddings.
Well, I mean, the point is just to say that if you imagine what's the more provocative act that would cause a war, well, obviously killing a top military official in public with a drone strike is probably more provocative than accidentally bombing a wedding, as unfortunate as bombing a wedding is, obviously, right?
I would actually say the opposite. And I think killing that official was seen as an assassination. And are you going to go to war with the United States as Iran? No, you're not. But would you fight harder in a civil war in Yemen? Yeah, you would.
That's kind of my point, though, right? Is that like either sort of implicitly or explicitly, the more provocative act seems to be assassinating an Iranian official versus, basically targeting what you think is a terrorist group, but it turns out to be a Pakistani wedding, right? Now, these are lives that are being lost, right? And we could even 100%. Argue that Soleimani was a terrible guy. But if we're talking about like actual hawkishness, the thing that would cause a war to start, right, between states. I mean, it's going to be something
maybe,
like
but there's almost no chance of Iran declaring war on the United States no matter what we do. I mean, they're not going to declare war on us.
That's true because they didn't declare war. That's true.
Yeah, doesn't really matter what we do.
Symbolic bombing of an abandoned military base, right? But
correct.
I'm just to say, that's all to say that Trump dropping the mother of all bombs and doing stuff, but then when you look at Biden, right, the drone activity has gone down significantly, I don't think Biden's gotten us out of a war, which Trump never did. So I think the dove credentials are a little bit stronger with Biden than Trump. But to be fair, you never know. It's not the end of the term. We're only 2 years in, or we're only a year in. Are you free to answer some questions from the chat? I'd love to. Love to pepper you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, come beat me up. Have your boys beat me up. I'm fine.
All right, everyone. Put your questions in the chat for Larry, running for governor of New York, libertarian candidate for New York. Well, presumptive nominee. I guess I don't know how the nomination process works, but I don't know. Is there actually a libertarian primary, or do you just convention it? Or
nope, I remember we're not officially a party. They took that away, so I have to get signatures. So assuming I get my signatures by May 31st, I will be officially on the ballot in June.
But what if like two libertarians got like the signatures? How would that work?
They
Wouldn't
could
there
in
have to
theory,
be a
but
primary?
they could in theory. No, what would happen if that does happen? This is how New York State works. If for some reason some other guy says he's a libertarian, spends six figures and gets hundreds of volunteers and gets 70,000 signatures, that could happen. Assuming that happens, whoever hands it in first officially becomes Libertarian Party nominee. However, the one bad part is in the case of the Libertarian Party, we actually, the National Party actually owns the intellectual property of the Libertarian Party. So they'd have to be something else, like the big Libertarian Party of New York or something. They couldn't be Libertarian Party of New York because we own the IP.
Ah, I see. I see. Okay. Let's see. Okay. Oh wait, hold on. I'm trying to. I saw a question that I. Ah, yes. He says he's a libertarian, but in his ad, he's standing on a public sidewalk. Nice try, charlatan. What is your response to that, Larry?
Wow, that guy's fucking stupid. So I pay for the sidewalk. So libertarians don't stand on sidewalks? What are you, 7? Stop, man. What's wrong with you? Those stupid things
Look,
drive me crazy.
Well, Larry, what the heck? You're
he uses
standing on a public sidewalk as a libertarian. My goodness.
What's wrong with you? What's wrong with
Using
this
a
guy?
public subway as a libertarian?
He's joking. I hope he's joking.
Goodness. I don't think he's joking, Larry. I think your credentials are being called into question.
I pay taxes for that sidewalk. Of course I'm in a sidewalk. Who said I'm not paying taxes? Who says I shouldn't pay taxes?
I got you. Yeah, no,
what is he talking
I
about? So libertarians should. So look, if I want to be a hardcore libertarian, when I go live out in the woods or something and don't pay taxes and not running water and buy some in Bitcoin, okay, maybe he's right. I probably shouldn't come into the city and stand on the sidewalk, I guess. But I live in the city. I've been paying city taxes for decades. Yeah, I can walk on the sidewalk. I don't know what he's talking about.
No, I understand. It's probably more in jest. Let's see. Minimum wage, question mark. What do you think about the minimum wage in New York? Should it be abolished, lowered, raised? What do you think?
Yeah, the issue is if we do the right negative income tax, it shouldn't matter that much, right? With a good negative income tax, it shouldn't matter that much. So I don't want it to be a big deal for two reasons. One, we shouldn't be worried about minimum wage. We should be worried about people having an income. I don't need people to be wage earners, if that makes any sense. If they are, that's fine, right? You can be, but I don't want that to be the requirement. So that's why I prefer the income versus the wage, because maybe you don't want to be a wage earner. So I would rather it not be that big of a deal. If we create it right, it won't matter. $15 is fine, whatever. I think in New York State now it's, hold on. I think in New York City it's 15 and upstate it's 13.20 or something like that. I'm fine with it. It shouldn't be a big deal. I don't want to make it a big deal.
Okay, that's reasonable. Let's see. Question for Larry. Other than leasing out bridge names, how else will he raise state revenue?
Yeah, there's a bunch of ways. I'll give you two. I give maybe two or three. One of them is specifically for New York City. It may work for some other cities. I'm unsure, but it will definitely work in New York City. And that is, you want to allow the subway trains at night to bring in freight into the city. Now, what does that mean? Well, if we bring in freight into the city, the actual subway lines can't take freight trains. It's not going to work. So they'll have to rebuild the entire system. So we'll get a free built system, us free. They'll pay for it, obviously. And along with that, they'll get some form of naming rights, some form of scheduling priority when it comes to nighttime deliveries. And they'll be able to also get their freight directly into New York City that way. So that will also that will fund the MTA along with the naming rights piece. Those two together help tremendously. But that's not enough. On top of that, we can also make it to where when it comes to major highways outside of big cities, right? We can also allow larger organizations like the Googles and Amazons of the world to create their own types of roads, electric car roads, the Google roads, or whatever the case may be, next to the actual highway. So if you now have two options, you can take the Google road if they're going to charge you for whatever, it's fine. If they want to, they can. Or the regular highway if you want to, whatever you want. But then tolls can go away because their rental fee for the secondary road is maintenance on the primary road, right? So now they take care of the primary road. Now, if they want to charge for the other road, they can. That's up to you if you want to take it or not. But that's also a road that now can take commercial traffic. So that road can take commercial traffic. So there'll be less traffic on the main highway interstate. And all of a sudden now we're saving more cash. And depending on how long this takes, maybe even raising money from that. The last thing I want to do is I want to create a trust. I think we can take the backing of New York State, maybe $80 billion. We think that's about our tax revenue for 1 year, give or take, to put towards a trust. And if we do it right, we could literally come close to Singapore or Norway within 3 to 4 years. We could actually do about $900 billion in 3 to 4 years. And that would basically be heavily a system to where people buy in and it's not debt, but they get dividends based upon how much tax revenue New York State brings in every year. If we do it right, we'll get permanent capital and private capital, throw tons of money at this. And if they do it right, they will be spending money so that we can pay for the services of first the negative income tax. Then I hope to next education. That's my next hope. And then my third piece would be Medicaid, Medicare. If we can do that, that will be the goal that would step up over the course of 4 years. Again, assuming that everything goes well. The last thing is we want to build our 3 nuclear power plants. 3 nuclear power plants on 3 separate grids. And at least one of those nuclear power plants is going to sell energy that the state can make money on.
Okay, that makes sense. And it looks like Lyra, for $5, has asked more of a national question. What is
Okay.
Larry's opinion on the Federal Reserve and the gold standard?
Well, I don't know if we can ever go back to the gold standard. I don't know, right? I'm unsure if we can go to it. But would I rather not
answer
have a fiat
is no.
currency? It isn't. That's what I think, right? I feel like we've gone too far. We can never go back. But I don't know that for sure. I have a feeling. How about that? This is not based upon anything physical. It is a feeling, right? I don't have data on this. It's just my gut. I think it would feel good to go back to a gold standard, but I don't know if we ever could. I feel like we can't. But do I like the Federal Reserve? No, the Federal Reserve is a disaster. It is. Most people have no idea what it is or what it does. It's supposed to help us. It only hurts us. It ensures that we have horrible fiat currency and inflation. It's breaking our economy by giving free money away. It is nothing but bad, bad, bad. It helps out the wealthy and punishes those who are on Social Security. It's bad in every level possible. I wish we can get rid of it tomorrow.
Okay, that makes sense. I definitely disagree. I think the Federal Reserve is a good thing, but that's more of a national issue anyway, right? That's not something you're concerned with as governor of New York anyway. What are some strategies Larry has for homelessness within urban areas?
Yeah, there's several things. One of them is I mentioned is of course the NIT, and the NIT advantage is that would give people an incentive to create more homes. Because if money goes to account, we can make a deal to where the money goes directly into the account so that people can get their rent paid. That makes any sense, right? But to do that, we have to fight 2 things: tiny homes and nimbyism. And those are our 2 big issues, those 2 things, right? That's what slows us down is those 2 things. The first thing is tiny homes. You can't really do tiny homes in New York City. It's basically against our rules, and that has to end immediately. And why tiny homes? If you understand the homeless population, it's broken down into 2 or 3 different groups, right? There's the working poor, there's the addict, there's the mentally ill. It's broken up. So the first piece is the people who are just like the working poor. The working poor can move into tiny homes very fast, right? Because they're working poor. Very fast, go right in, and they'll begin to move themselves out of that. That type of situation is created. You create a system we're doing a couple of them now in the Bronx. It's basically an apartment building that is set up for a specific type of person, demographic. For example, working mom with kids, or even maybe addict, older veteran who has been homeless for 20, 30 years. A specific demographic. Why? That demographic, they go in there and what they have to pay is 1/3 of their income. If your income's nothing, you pay nothing. If your income's $100,000, you pay $30,000, right? You just pay 1/3 of your income. The only thing you must do is let people know what your income is. If you agree to that, you can go to that place. You make a tiny home because people who've been on the street for a long time, they tend to not know how to deal with larger homes. Again, with the exception of the working poor. When it comes to addicts, people been homeless for a while, mental ill, they tend to go into small areas on their own. If you give them bigger homes, they tend to move into one room. So you give them a tiny home, make it legal, make them do it. And in the basement is where you have all your services. You have your services for people who, again, if they're addicts, if they need child care, the services is in the basement, which is why each for a demographic, right? If you're a parent with kids, childcare is in the bottom, right? Some kind of family room with your kids is there. And of course, you have security. So that's piece one, tiny homes, and then allowing those to exist. How do you pay for those? The tiny homes get paid for by the NIT, and then the other place can be paid for by the NIT, or they can be paid for by individual companies like Ronald McDonald House. You can sponsor them if they want to. People want to, put some of their money into this marketing. They can market to do it too if they want to, whichever makes the most sense for them. You also have to support people where they are. And for many of our homeless populations, that's the MTA. That's buses and that's subways. One thing we can do in the subways is you can literally make the last car. I'm calling the, if I remember right, it's called the caboose support. I can't remember some cool name for it too. I'm always trying to come up with names and stuff. I think it's called the caboose support structure or something like that. Where the last car of every other train is basically a facility for people who are in trouble. So it could be for your addicts, if you're homeless, there'll be security there. And once we rebuild the system, there'll be Wi-Fi in there. So, oh, it's Johnny, you there? Let me check you out. What's going on with your meds? How you doing? What's going on? Have a seat. Get some sleep in a safe spot, that kind of thing. So you can treat them at the MTA. You can treat them in tiny homes. You can begin to support them in general with the NIT.
It doesn't sound like you agree with the kind of the Denver or maybe the Eric Adams approach of being really criminally harsh on the homeless.
I'm a libertarian. Why would I want to add more cops?
Well, not add more cops. I mean more like basically like criminalizing camping and urban, stuff like that, where basically
okay, I'm a libertarian. If there's no victim, there's no crime.
There you go. All right, that's
right.
fair
If
enough.
There's no victim, there's no crime. So if there's a victim, there's a crime. There's a victim, there's no crime. Why would I want to put somebody in jail for existing? Again, if he's hitting someone over the head to get, a blanket, that's a crime. Don't hit people, right?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I agree. That makes a lot of sense. And I think there was one last question. Yes. Capital gains taxes taxed as income. What do you think?
I think taxes is bad in general. If we're gonna have taxes, this is fine. Whatever. Yeah. In New York State, we don't do that. New York State, just capital gains is just regular tax, just income.
Right. So I think the question is more that
I want to make it to where we have no state income tax. Then I don't care. Right? If we do it right,
well,
in 4 years, state income tax goes away. In which case, there's no capital gains either.
Well, do you think capital gains taxes, like, would you count that as like, oh, well, I want to get rid of this as a form of income tax, or do you think it would still exist in a world without income tax? Like, do you think capital gains taxes are a good idea?
Oh, okay. If we're going to have an income tax, which I hate, but if we're going to have an income tax, capital gains is income, right? I'd like to make it to where there's no income tax, and it won't matter.
No, I get that, but I'm saying,
yes.
Let's say that let's say you get your
in
wish.
In a world with income tax, capital gains is income. Yes, in a world with income tax, it is.
No, I get that. I'm saying, let's say you've got your world where there's no income tax, right?
Then there'd be no capital gains tax. No,
right. You still wouldn't want to tax capital gains, though. You think that would be bad?
Yes, I would like no income tax. Capital gains is income. I would like no income tax, but I realize
sure,
that's not where we are, right? I get it. That's
right.
I get it. So if I had my perfect world income, if I had tax magic powers, if I had it, I would want to get rid of it all. However, to be forward, even if I could magically get rid of income tax tomorrow, I'd have to have a plan for it because people still currently need services. So I have to find a way to deal with that issue, whether community steps up, individuals step up, we retain the taxes for a while until we can get them paid, whatever. But I don't want to leave people dangling. That's the wrong answer. So I want to get rid of all those taxes as long as I was able to find a way to still service people prior to that happening. If that makes any sense.
Well, what kind of taxes do you like?
The best tax of all taxes, if they're augmented taxes, it's generally consumption tax, right? The more I use, uses are consumption tax. Those are as far as taxes go, those are the best ones. I mean, those are the least bad ones. There we go. Those are the least bad taxes, are consumption and usage. Those are the least bad.
Well, hey, I mean, people will say income tax is just a tax on future consumption, right?
Yeah, but the problem is, right, the reason why I prefer the negative income tax is because then you can create a fair tax, and it becomes fair because the first 36,000 are not being taxed. So by default, the wealthy are paying more by default, right, in a fair tax scheme. If it's a fair tax scheme with a $36,000 floor, the poor people are paying far less taxes compared to the wealthy because they're getting $36,000 off the top. And the average American makes what, 40 some odd thousand? Is my numbers about right? 40 some odd thousand is the average American, I think. Whatever that now. I think New York's higher. New York's like 50. So I think the average American is like 40,000. So that means they're only paying tax on about $4,000. Way better. So fair tax or flat tax becomes way better if you drop that 36,000 off the top.
Yeah, that makes sense. It looks like based on here, it looks like New York has a relatively competitive state sales tax rate, but if you combine it with local average
It's
local
not competitive
state
anymore. Yes,
yeah, it becomes it becomes higher.
that's
But,
correct. Yes.
but you could say the same
Absolutely.
thing about Texas. Obviously, Texas has
No.
mostly funds their stuff through sales tax, but we don't have an income tax, so that's and we don't have a corporate tax either, if I'm not mistaken. So a lot less taxes in Texas. Nobody's going to argue with that. Well, all right, Larry. I don't have any more questions other
Well,
than
my people have some.
oh, my people have some. Well, hold on. I have one more question. Can you
Okay.
put me? I reached out to Howie on Twitter. He hasn't gotten back to me. You said he's your friend. All
He
right. Can you
is
put me in contact? I want to talk to Howie as well. All right. I need to
100%.
get
Yep.
all these gubernatorial candidates. All
Look,
right,
I'll
on the
give him a
train.
call.
Yeah, sure. Why not? I
I'll give him a
DM'd him
call.
on
Yeah.
Twitter. Have a fun time.
I'm not sure he's on Twitter.
He is on Twitter. It's just he said that apparently his staff or volunteers run it. So I don't know who I'm talking to.
That's what I mean. He's not on Twitter.
Yeah, it's like a public account. Yeah, I get what you're
Yeah,
saying.
yeah. I don't think he is actually himself is on Twitter. To be forward, most of my social media is not run by me either.
Well, hey, look, that's probably
Yeah.
why it's, I tell people, I reached out to Larry to do this interview. I got a message back in like 60 seconds. Libertarian efficiency. All right. Like you
Yes.
said, no
I
more
ha- I
3 hour
have
waits for your Twitter
Well,
responses.
what also happens, generally speaking, is once someone reaches out, all my social media is monitored. And if someone like says, "Hey, we want to put you on something," my team's like, "Hey, you want to be on something?" So I tend to get a blast right away.
That makes sense. Yeah, if you could put me in contact with Howie, that'd be great. I'd love to interview him because obviously he's very in a similar position where he's a very obviously he helped found the Green Party, so he's a very
Yes.
well-known Green. But all right, yeah, any questions from your chat, I'd be happy to answer them. Let's do it.
Let me see if we have any that are out here for you. Actually, there's some comments, I guess.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, one guy says there should be no minimum wage. So that's very libertarian, obviously. So yes, clearly.
Well, I mean, I guess that is one idea, not to have a minimum wage. I mean, most of the economies that I like a lot don't have minimum wages. The Nordic countries don't have minimum wages. Now, to be fair, oftentimes conservatives and libertarians will only mention the first half of that story. They don't have minimum wage, but they have high wages. Whereas the second half is, well, they also have pretty ubiquitous and universal unionization, very, very
Yes.
generous social welfare programs.
Yes.
And so in a world with generous social welfare programs and ubiquitous unionization and worker board membership, well, you don't need a union or you don't need a minimum wage.
Yes.
But,
agreed.
in a world without those things,
There's another issue, though. Many of those countries, by percentage, their poor pay a whole lot more tax than the wealthy do.
That's true, but they get a whole lot more, right? So that's
They
the
do.
trade-off. That's
Yes.
the ideological trade-off, right? Is that
100%.
the poor middle income people in Nordic countries and Northern Europe, Western Europe pay more in taxes.
Yep.
But then they get more services. I heard
Correct.
a person from France describe this, and I think it sort of perfectly characterized maybe the ideological differences between the average Frenchman and the average American, which is that he said, in France, we're always having these riots and these protests, right? And it's because we expect our government to do stuff for us, right?
Yes.
That is our expectation.
Yes.
And whereas in America, oftentimes there's more of a, we expect our government to get out of our way a lot of the times, right?
Yes.
So, that's some of that ideological divide. But anyway, any more questions? Let's do it. I'm interested in hearing what your audience.
Shelley says, "What's the best area to live in Texas, and what's the worst?"
That's a great question. It really depends on your personal preferences. I mean, I'm not. As I get older, I like the idea of living in a rural area more and more. I don't
Mm.
know. That seems pretty normal. It seems like, when you're young, you want to live in more urban, happening area, but then you get old and you start hating everybody and you want to live in some middle of nowhere place, right? Um, and so, I like that idea. But if for me though, if you're really into politics, and the political leaning that I have, I could probably never live in a rural area, right? Because I just
Mm.
wouldn't be able to do anything or get anything done. So given that we're kind of relegated to urban areas, I would say Houston's the best place to live in
Mm.
Texas. I think every time I go to San Antonio, I get closer and closer to saying San Antonio is the best place. But then I leave San Antonio and come back to Houston. I'm like, I don't know what I was thinking. That's ridiculous, right? but but San Antonio is also really, really great. Dallas is like the New York of Texas. It's the business
Mhm.
center. So, if you want to work in investing or something like that, Dallas is the best. El Paso exists, but I've never been there, so I can't judge it.
There we go.
And Austin's the California of Texas, right? It's very, very hippy dippy kind of liberal area.
Mhm.
And it's I don't like Austin, not because of the people, it's because of they have a terrible highway infrastructure. They have
Okay.
two highways. They've got the highway that goes north and south and the highway that goes east and west. And that's it. And when you're the capital of Texas, you've got a shitload of people coming in and out for all kind of things. You have a conference that's taking up a quarter of downtown all the time, or some event, or some what do you call it, some art festival or whatever it is. And then the other quarter of downtown Austin is taken up by the University of Texas school system.
Hmm.
And so all of that in combination with a terrible highway infrastructure basically means that the traffic in Austin is ungodly terrible. And so I hate Austin personally
I
because of
saw
that.
that. I spoke at South by Southwest a couple months ago, and yeah, it was packed.
Yeah,
Yes,
it's unbelievable. Like you wouldn't
it was
expect,
packed.
it's not like Houston's like 4 times as big as
Yep.
Austin. It's probably got a quarter of the traffic, right? And
Right.
so, Houston's got some of the best highway infrastructure, I think, for a big city in the country, though, to be fair. So,
Well, there we go. David agrees with you. He thinks the gold standard. He says, I think 30 trillion in debt will make it impossible to get back to a gold standard. So he's with you on that one.
maybe. Well, here's the thing, right? So, a gold standard restricts the amount of money that can be created. That's true because you have to
Mhm.
have gold backing every dollar,
Right.
at least theoretically, right? And so that means you either have to mine gold or you have to import gold to
Mhm.
make more money.
Right.
Um, However, that's not necessarily the best thing because, when an economy is expanding, people want more money. People are looking for dollars, right? And when you have a really rigid system that isn't necessarily able to respond to technological advancements or like shifts in the economy, you end up with a more volatile market for currency, right? Where people are clamoring for dollars, or people don't want dollars and they just want the gold, right? And so when you had the gold standard, you saw huge periods of deflation, typically followed by huge periods of inflation. Whereas it seems like the business environment and typically people prefer it if we had stable prices, right? And so if we have plus or minus between 0 and 2% is typically what it is, right? And obviously right now that's different, but that's not because we don't have a gold standard. That's better for people in the business, right? And so that's why I'm a big defender of the Federal Reserve, and I don't think a gold standard is a good idea. People talk about like more absurdly, people talk about like a Bitcoin backed currency or something, which that just seems even crazier than a gold standard. So I'm pretty negative on a gold standard personally.
So you like the current system that we have with the Fed, which is creating more and more and more inflation. When I was a kid, and this I'll tell you a story real fast. When I was a kid,
Yeah.
my first experience with inflation was with a slice of
Okay.
pizza. Slice of pizza. When I was a kid in the Bronx in the
Oh my
70s.
God. Is this going to be back in my day? Pizza was a
Yes, it
nickel.
is. I'm gonna give you back in my day. I am gonna give you one. I am. So
All right,
back
let's
in
do it.
my day, back in the 70s in the Bronx, there's a place called Joe's Pizza. It was on 161st Street. So I went down there and it was 40 cents for a slice of pizza. Then I went there one day and I gave the guy 50 cents and he gave me a nickel back. And I said, you made a mistake. It's 40 cents, not 45 cents. He goes, nah, it's 45 cents. Price went up. And I was like, what? Prices go up? What? what? I could not imagine that a price would go up. I was like 7 or whatever, however old I was. I couldn't imagine that price would go up. It was impossible that I would imagine that. And now pizza is a whole lot more than 45 cents. I'm not sure I'm happy about that Fed.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, well, to be fair though, it sounds like it's not that you're not happy with the functions of the Fed. It sounds like you're just unhappy with their target, right? Because the Fed can very well target a 0% inflation, right? And that would be a more reasonable argument. Many economists have made that argument that if you've got a standard unit of account, which is a dollar, that should be a stable unit of account, right? Over time in terms of purchasing power. So many people argue for a 0% inflation target. And some people argue for a higher inflation target. It should be 4 or 5%, right? And so to me, that's a lot more reasonable of an argument than we should get rid of the Fed's functions or we should have a gold standard. I think the low and stable inflation makes more sense than a 0% target because when it comes to, how do I put this? Typically, it's the case that prices are underestimated. So usually if you see 0% sort of an official target, well, they're assuming that they're probably overshooting that. Right. And so that's why you wouldn't necessarily target 0% because then you might actually inadvertently be causing deflation. It makes it a lot more precarious to avoid deflation because, at least from an economic perspective, deflation is like a lot worse than inflation.
Sure.
And so having an upper bound that gives you more wiggle room is better than basically 0%, which is no wiggle room at all. And also, to be fair, if we believe that cutting interest rates is a way by which we can stimulate an economy that's going through a contraction, well, if we have an expectation of 2%, everyone understands and realizes 2% is the expectation, well, people can typically live with that. And to the extent that real wages are still going up, it's fine. And to the extent that if we have a contraction, well, now we have room to lower rates and bring inflation up, right? That's probably a good thing, right? Whereas causing lowering rates when we already have a 0%
The
target
reason
is pretty
why
difficult.
I'm not on board here is
All right.
because what the Fed has done is react. As you've said, they should react, right? That's the original goal of the Fed was to control inflation. That was one of the original goals of the Fed, and the other one was to have high employment, right? Was to help with employment and control inflation. Was the goals of both of them. However, they have done a pretty crappy job of all of that. And what's wound up happening, I see, and you tell me if you think I'm wrong here, is because of them basically having zero inflation. I'm sorry, zero interest rate, basically, for the past, 10 years now, 15 years, whatever the number is. The rich keep getting richer and the poor keep getting poorer. And that's a biggest reason for the wealth gap. There are many other reasons also. I don't want to say it's the only reason, but it's allowed permanent capital to purchase everything. It's allowed permanent capital to dominate everything. It's allowed the United States to have far too high a percentage of its income and economy based upon finance than anything else. I feel like this has been it has been a big problem, bigger than anything else. If there was no Fed, I'm not saying things would be great. I feel like they couldn't be worse.
I disagree. I mean, we've seen a world without a Fed, and that's a world with way more volatile prices and economic precariousness than we have today. When I say without a Fed, I mean without a credible Fed that controls interest rates as a means to stabilize prices and employment. And that was a worse world than we had before.
Give me an example of that.
Yeah, so I mean, before 1978, when Volcker decided that the Fed was going to get off its ass and do something for once about inflation, we had incredibly large swings in prices, right? We had large periods of deflation, large periods of inflation. There was not a lot of stability with regard to pricing, right? Which isn't good for business or anyone. It's not good for the mom who's struggling to pay for groceries. It's not good for the corporation that's trying to make investment decisions.
So hold on. So what you're saying is that our economy was worse from 1917 to 1978 compared to 1978 to now.
Well, it was worse in terms of price stability, right? We can certainly criticize the sort of neoliberal era in the effects of the economy,
but if the prices are going up or down, but real earning and wages are going up too, nobody cares, right? If a carton of milk now costs $1 million, but I make $1 million an hour, I don't really care, right? As long as I'm making $1 million an hour, I don't care. It's fine, right? But if I don't see that happening at all. I feel like stuff's gotten worse since that's happened in 78. That's when I see that the wealth gap has exploded since that time. I mean, that's almost exactly the time when the wealth gap began to explode. Am I
Yeah,
wrong?
sure, but well, real wages have increased, pretty much. Well, not every year, but because obviously there's years where there's recessions and stuff. But real wages have been precipitously increasing since that period, right? And to be fair,
No,
they've
I
also
didn't
been
say
increasing.
wages. No. I'm sorry, but I'm not clear on that. I apologize. I
Yeah,
meant wealth. I meant wealth, not wages. My mistake if I said wages. I meant wealth.
yeah,
That
yeah.
buying
So
power and wealth, the gap has gone
yeah,
since
if you're
then.
talking about yeah, if you're talking about like income share of the top 10 or 1% or whatever it
Yep.
is, basically just income inequality, right? That's definitely increased. Now,
Yes.
to be fair, though, I think that the finger towards wealth inequality is at least before 2020, and I'll explain why I say that in a minute. Um, is more squarely pointed at not at the Federal Reserve, but rather at these policies and these court decisions that made it really, really hard to unionize, right? And sort of
Mhm.
killed that movement, lowered taxes precipitously for the top 1%. I mean, that's obviously a much more direct cause for why income share of the top 1% is increasing over time rather than the Federal Reserve. Now, what I will grant you is that I think that the Federal Reserve's quantitative easing in 2020 was extraordinary.
Yes.
And I think that to me at least, there is a legitimate argument for saying that while the point of quantitative easing fundamentally is we need to have inflation. We need some amount of inflation. We don't want deflation. And recessions tend to cause deflation. That's not something we
Mhm.
want, right? And so, given that, right, um, we also, don't necessarily always only want to have interest rates as a tool in our toolbox to cause that, right? And this is where quantitative easing comes in, basically swapping assets with cash.
Mhm.
And there's more cash in the market, and less liquid assets go down. And so, in theory, inflation should go up. Now, the issue is that while inflation does increase, sort of in a trickle down sense, like real inflation, quote unquote, with quantitative
Okay.
easing, asset price inflation seems to be affected a lot more than
Mhm.
real inflation, like consumer inflation. And so when you've got a scenario where basically the top 1% or the top 10% are hugely disproportionate stock owners and bondholders, and you've
And
got the
property
scenario,
owners.
yeah, I'm property owners, sure.
Yep.
And you've got a scenario where you're buying, basically mortgage-backed securities, bonds, and even not corporate equity, corporate bonds.
Yep.
Um, there's a huge amount of asset price inflation that seems to disproportionately be affecting the top 1%, right? Um, and so that seems to happen in 2020, and not necessarily when they did in 2008 and 2012, but I think that that's more of an issue with the modern Fed than the Fed of the last 40 years. And it's really only an issue with this new tool that they've been using. So, in general, though, the idea that the Federal Reserve is in charge of controlling inflation and maximizing employment, mostly with the use of interest rates, it's an unmitigated success. It's why every developed country in the world does it.
I think we'll have to agree to disagree on that one.
We agree to disagree on that one,
There we
Larry.
go. Shelley
All right.
asked, after speaking with Larry, what struck you as an idea that you would employ if you had the power to do so?
I mean, I like a negative income tax, right? I've
Here we
been
go. We're winning.
yeah, I mean, I've been a fan of negative income tax for a while. Similarly, I think that in terms of political feasibility, I mean, people will make esoteric arguments like, well, technically, if you progressively tax a UBI is dollar for dollar the exact same thing as a negative income tax. And it's like, okay, economist guy, we get it. Okay, I understand that mathematically you might be correct, but that's not what people are going to resonate with, right?
Right.
And the reality is when they see, Elon Musk and Bill Gates and these guys getting the same $1,000 that the poorest homeless guy on the street gets, there's going
Yep.
to be a real problem, right?
100%.
And I think that it's like, hey, instead of 12 grand for lower income people, make it 18 and call it a negative income tax. I mean, to me, that just seems better of a policy. It's also a heck of a lot cheaper. And personally, right, I mean, I know that I'm a progressive, but in general, market-based solutions are not alien to progressive thought. The idea just that, give those dollars to the single mom and let her spend it how she wants. She's probably not starving her kid. And if she is, that's already illegal, right? So,
Mhm. Yep.
to me, I like that idea. I don't know of So a negative income tax is still expensive to implement, right? So UBI and negative income tax are both expensive. UBI just is like 4 or 5 times the cost. And given the limited tax base of any given state, I honestly don't. I don't know how. I don't know how easily a state could implement
Yeah.
such an expensive program. It's the main reason that states like California and Vermont have shied away from their single payer proposals, because once they
Yep.
put it on paper and it's like, oh shit, to pay for this, we need to have a 10% payroll tax. It's like,
Yep.
well, I mean, yeah, maybe that's net better for the consumer, which it is, but people are going to, in the short term, see probably a system that's getting off the ground, probably not perfect. South Korea took 10 years to implement their single payer system, right? So for 10 years, you're paying a shitload more in taxes and probably getting a mediocre service, right? And people have to weigh through that, and that's going to be politically pretty scary for a lot of politicians. And so,
100%.
I don't know if the funding exists for a negative income tax at a state level. It probably does in some theoretical sense, but
which is why I said it has to come through a trust, right? I as a libertarian, I can't say use a negative income tax and then raise taxes for it. It's just it's against my nature. I can't do it. So I've got to come up with a trust, a way to pay for it. Most of the successful socialist countries have some form of trust, right? So we need to create one too. And this will make your socialist people unhappy when I say it, but socialism works well when you combine it with capitalism. Then it's great,
well,
right?
I mean, Texas has a sovereign wealth fund, right? Alaska has a sovereign wealth fund. So I mean, it's and
not
like
really. I mean,
well,
not
really, I mean it is. No, it's a sovereign wealth fund just as much as the Norwegians have a sovereign wealth fund. It is a pool of assets that are invested in by the state that is funded with a state resource. In the case of Texas, it's oil money. Alaska, it's oil money. In the case of New York City, it's the pension money, right? So New York City has a sovereign wealth fund, right? It's just that it's
not
for
really.
a specific purpose.
Again,
It
not
is,
really,
though.
though. I mean, it is. The problem is the government runs it completely, right? In the case of Norway and the case of Singapore, separate companies run it and the government oversees it.
Well,
So
no. That's
it's a little
I
bit
don't know
different.
about I don't know about
A little bit
Singapore, but
different.
Norway,
It is. It's a
well,
little bit
no,
different, is what I'm saying.
In Singapore, I don't know the case. I don't think private companies run the sovereign wealth fund in Singapore. In Norway, I know it's not the case. It's the central bank that runs the Norwegian. That's the central bank actually that runs the sovereign wealth fund in Norway, right? So it's
Yeah, but the central bank isn't it's not officially the government, right? Is it officially
I
a private
mean,
company?
Well, no. I mean, like the Federal Reserve in America is a part of the
It's,
government, right? I mean,
no, it isn't. It's a private banking cartel.
okay, the Federal Reserve is
The
not a
Federal Reserve
private bank.
is a private banking cartel. That's
You
not a
think
government.
well, hold
Yes.
on, Larry. You think the Federal Reserve is like a private institution? Why do they get why does the head of the chair? Why does the chair get appointed by the Senate? It's clearly a government entity. Come on
It's
now.
not a government entity. Were they getting checks? Are they getting paid by the government? Does the government tell them what they can do? Does the president fire them?
Well, just because something's an auxiliary service doesn't mean that it's not a government entity, right? I mean, by that logic, the Postal Service isn't a government entity.
No, they're government employees. Government unions, whole deal. They're government employees. They're getting checks from the government. Yes.
No, they're getting checks from the Postal Service,
which is in the Constitution, which is the government.
Well, no, but what I'm saying is that the Federal Reserve is an auxiliary service in the sense that they're self-funded for the most part, and they are getting checks from the federal. The employees get checks from the Federal Reserve. The Postal Service, right? They are self-funded for the most part, right? And they have an independent union, an independent board. Joe Biden can't even get rid of the head of he can't even appoint the head of the Postal Service, right? And so all that I'm saying is that calling the Federal Reserve a non-government entity is similar. It's like calling the Postal Service a non-government entity. It's not.
All right, then if you want to go that road, then I would say the Postal Service is not a government entity, but it is because the government gives it a monopoly. I mean, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it isn't. Okay.
Yeah, that's weird. I don't know. I mean, I just it's.
But the Federal Reserve,
it's
we don't elect them, we don't vote for them, we don't have any control over them. It's the Fed is it's a banking cartel. They select the banks.
We don't vote for the Supreme Court, but I mean, our elected officials are in charge with that. We entrust our elected officials with that task, right? And the court's just as much of a government.
But again, just like the post office, the Supreme Court's in the Constitution, right?
Well, the Federal Reserve was established with an official act of Congress, right? So I mean, it's You know, it
Maybe.
didn't
I don't know.
sprout up out of nowhere. But anyway, that's obviously an aside. I mean, we can agree what the Federal Reserve does and whether it's good or bad, you know, whether or not it's public or private. It's just to say that the sovereign wealth funds of Norway are, you know, those are state officials that are directing and overseeing that, and they're appointed with, you know, the democratic will of the parliament. And similarly, in Texas and Alaska, we have sovereign wealth funds that are just at the state level. I would call the New York Pension Fund a sovereign wealth fund. It's just that it's for a specific purpose. And so that's all to say that really, sovereign wealth funds are great. So I mean, I like the idea. It's just that Texas doesn't have to implement it because we already got one. So
right. All right, so I guess we're good for the evening. I kept you for 2 hours. I apologize.
No worries. It was fun, Larry. It's rare that you get a gubernatorial candidate that'll sit for more than a 10-minute CNN interview. So it's nice to.
And that's my point for all your people who are saying, "Who's this Larry Sharpe guy?" I sat here and gave you actual answers. I didn't dodge any questions. I answered them all, whether you like me or not. I didn't give you a bunch of rhetoric. I didn't blame the other guy. I actually gave you answers.
There we go. All right. And be sure, I'm going to hold you to reach out to Howie. I want to get him on here as well. I think that'd be a fun conversation as well. But thanks for coming on. I will link your website in my chat. And well, actually, do you want me to link here? You said it wasn't updated, but do you still want me to
please link it? Yes, we are working on it. I still want people to see it. Most of the stuff, even if I don't agree with it now, I agree with it then. So you still get my mindset either way. So please, yes, connect it. Absolutely.
There we go. It's easy enough, people. It's LarrySharpe.com. All right. So go for it. Follow him. If you want to volunteer, go for that as well. I mean, personally, I think we can all agree that, you know, I'd rather the second party be the Libertarians than the Republicans. I'd still be a Democrat, but you know, I'd rather fight a Libertarian than a Republican any day of the week, because at least we can agree that, you know, gay rights should exist and some more fundamental agreements. So anyway, but thanks for coming on, Larry. It was a fun time, and maybe 6 months down the road, we can see how the campaign's going as the election season nears. When's the deadline to get on the ballot?
May 31st.
May 31st. And May 31st. How's it looking? You looking good?
We don't start till 4 days from now.
Why is that? You can't start until
correct? As I said, they go out of their way to make sure that I only get 5 weeks to do this.
I see.
That's correct.
I see. Okay.
They want to make it as hard as possible, and it's working.
I guess tune in I guess the end of May, and we'll see how it goes. I'm sure you're going to get the signatures, though. Got faith in you. And
if anybody wants to see other stuff I'm doing, I'm on all the interwebs things. I'm on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, all the things. I'm on all of them.
All the things, people. Well, all right, Larry. It was fun talking to you.
Have a good one.
You too, bud.